write down there's Gerd there.
Okay, good. Hi, Gerd.
Ah, yeah, hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Welcome. Thank you. Nice to see you. Yeah.
So, yeah, you were talking about a 4 vector there, Rajan, that can be turned into a 2x2 matrix. And how does that work? Could you show us that with the pen and paper?
Yeah, let me write down. It's an interesting thing. I mean, you are a little bit, yeah, I'm just.
Sorry to spring that on you, but it just came to mind. Like,
yeah,
we were talking about it last week. Christian,
oh,
how's
hi,
it going?
Christian.
Hello.
Oh, welcome.
Usual browser didn't want to do what it wanted it to do. So
you're in. Yeah, you're in.
You are okay, Christian? I mean, you have.
Yeah, more or less.
Is it like you got hurt or something? You got hurt or something?
No. This is infection. This is a bacterial thing which gives nice holes in the head and in the skin. Yeah.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah.
What is that like? How do you get that? Like, from where?
That is a 10-year-old story where I was bitten by an insect or something, and it was infected with a special dedicated Streptococcus evolution, which has a PVL factor, and that so-called PVL factor makes it extremely aggressive. It's like acid to the skin.
Oh,
so the exhaust of the bacteria is basically acid and killing the skin. And it can appear on any place. This is moving around on the body because it's very infectious in the sense when they have their reproduction phase and get liquid, little bit amount of blood, a scratch, a razor, a hair, whatever. And it can then continue in a different part of the body. Unfortunately, I infected my son because in families you have it then more often where, for example, a kitchen towel or anything is good enough to transfer it. It's not dangerous per se. I heard about 40% people in the world have streptococcus on its skin, and they're normal and they're doing nothing much. Like you have bacteria on your teeth and you brush them off every morning. But this PVL factor is a genetic thing which makes them quite unpleasant to have. But there is a long-term cure. It's just a lot of work. You have to basically trash your toothbrush twice a day and stuff like that. So it's not fun.
Right. Yeah, understood. Well, yeah, I mean, it's be a difficult thing to deal with, all right, medically. So, I mean,
I will survive it, to put it this way.
Yeah. So what about you changed the title there to the Newtonian G from psi Coulomb constant. So will you be able to deliver that talk today?
Yeah, sure, when I can. Yeah, if you agree. So I didn't want to upfront push if someone else has also something interesting. But what I did, I was working on an old computer system of mine, on an old 10-year-old MacBook Pro, which was my primary machine literally 15 years ago. And on that computer I had a bigger screen, and you have a bigger screen, you know my screen. Can you see my screen? Did I?
Not yet.
Do I already share my screen or no?
Not yet.
Oh, I can share it, yeah. But I have to allow it to be shared once you but first you have to share either the window or your entire screen.
Okay, entire screen is easier. Yeah. I have just to find the file iSpace presentation.
You cannot see a Gerd. I think the light behind the background is.
It's fine. No problem.
I try to get a better picture, but with the light behind me, it's not good. So it's better. No?
Yeah,
yeah.
I think when you're closer, or when your hand is closer there, it it's Just leave it like that. Just leave your hand up like the whole time.
If I change my place, then it will be better. Let's see.
Yeah, if you were to reverse.
Yeah, this is much better.
Then you don't have the nice view out the window. That's the only problem. Swings and roundabouts. Okay, very good.
So I uploaded the PDF and already transferred the PDF and the Mathematica notebook to you by email before. I'm not sure who of you had the time to have a quick look on it, because it was a spontaneous idea of mine to show that. Normally in iSpace, I need my library, you know, the one which I showed in the original video, that is about 6,000 to 10,000 equations running in sequence in the right order, that you get your library, like a Qt library for pixels and C++. I have my iSpace library for constants of nature. And that is didactically a bad thing, because you would need to even not understand, at least have all these equations in the right order in your Mathematica. So I would have to give you more or less a copy of everything I did in the last 20 years, which is technically possible, but not easy to handle. When I was at Gert's place, we have seen what happens when we do that. So this is not so easy. And the self-contained documents like that, so the iSpace and exact G from ICC Coulomb constant and basically nothing, means that that is a Mathematica document which will run at equation 1 and end at equation whatever it is. I haven't counted, it's not so many, so a couple of hundred maybe. And they run sequentially. And when they run sequentially, everything is defined not by even the Wolfram libraries, but locally, intentionally locally. This is not very elegant. Or Wolfram people would say, why are you doing that? Why do not use my cool feature XYZ? And the answer is because that is then completely independent of a specific Mathematica version, or even a cusp of any type. You can run it in outside Mathematica if you want, with different tools. And it's completely self-dependent, and probably you need a library to run it when you do it yourself. Have no Mathematica with arbitrary mathematical precision, so it's more than 16 digits. But aside of that, that should just work. There's nothing tricky in it. And why that is so interesting is not because of the title that you can derive G from the Coulomb constant. Technically, iSpace theory is able to show that you can derive any of the available constants of nature from any other, because that is mathematically possible. That has nothing to do that there's physics behind. I can always solve parts of the right side of an equation to the left side. And when you have an equation like G, where nearly all constants of nature are involved, you can always put G on the right side and the constants of your choice on the left side, and pretend to have claimed you have derived the constants from something else, and invented a new constant of nature numerically and all that, what a lot of people also on ResearchGate do. But that is not physics. That is not physics, because it's just algebra. It's fair to say so, but if you want something new, you need to find a relation which is really making geometric sense. And geometric sense with units, when you assign a GoldenRatio with the unit ampere, then it makes physical sense, because it's not just the algebraic number GoldenRatio, but it is the iSpace charge. And it is always the iSpace charge. And this paper will show you why the Coulomb constant can be transferred to G exactly. And that is because in the time before 2018, the Kodata committee had defined the Coulomb constant to be 1 over 4p epsilon 0. And in this way, it is essentially c squared as a numerical value, because that cancels out. And when you know that, c squared is an 18-digit number, but it's still an integer. Hence, it's discrete per definition. And it's discrete in a sense, even with 18 digits, it is quantized. Think of that. Yeah. So when you quantize something to 1, it looks cool, because you think 1 and 1 and 2 is multiple of the minimum energy or whatever. But it just doesn't matter if you take multiples of the speed of light numerical value or the multiple of 1. It's quantized, because there is no other geometry in it. And when you have an equation where you have on the left side something you want, which is exact, and on the right side you add only geometry, you naturally end up with a pure integer geometric derivation, and get hence an exact value for the thing you're calculating, in this case, the Newtonian gravitational constant G. And this is really easy. And from that point of view, I want to show you this not from the PDF, but try to share my screen and calculate it live in the Mathematica document line by line, so that you actually see what I'm doing all day when I'm doing these kind of things, because they are not just the results interesting, but more the method. The iSpace method is the interesting thing, to derive relations like that. And out of nowhere, you don't know it happens until you see. That's why it's so important not just to use the iSpace results, which is good enough, but to learn the methodologies, like learning integration when you don't know integration before, or differentiation. So Newton did something big, and then suddenly can calculate how the stars circulate, planets circulate around the sun. And everything we have for the good and the bad is derived from that method. And the iSpace is equally a method. It is not easy to sort into the current mathematical methods. It's a mix of integer, geometric things, and actually IT elements like variable names, encoding style, and stuff like that. Well, let me see how far we get. Christopher, when I want to see the screen, do I need to click something, or do you need to click something? Or do I already present? I'm not sure in what state the current situation is.
Oh yeah, at present you're just sharing one screen. So is that your entire screen, or?
No, I uploaded the document for the sake when anything goes wrong, you have the document, and when I reattach, it's still there. So this is this mechanism of the StreamYard tool. But I think I want to just fire up Mathematica with a document and do it line by line. So I would need to share my full screen.
Great. Okay. Yeah. At the moment, you're sharing a slide, I think, so I can remove that, and you can.
Yeah, you remove that, please. This is, I wasn't aware that what I did there by uploading it. So.
Okay. Right. So there's a slide. There's a slide. So you're going. Yeah. The next thing, I guess, is click present and follow those steps.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
No problem. And then I have to add it to the live stream. So it's the only control I have over the live stream is this part, and adding people. But everything else is up to you. So like whatever you share on the screen is going to be shared, as you well know, but also in future, Raja.
It's just fine.
Yeah.
Did you click? I didn't see it.
Oh, I see it now. Oh no, sorry. That is still the same thing.
No.
Is it?
Yeah.
Not yet. Okay. When I see it, I'll put it up. But at the moment, I don't see anything. I just have slide 1.
That's why we're training that. The tool is good, but actually quite complex. I have created an account myself and played a little bit with it. I find it quite complex. But it has its aspects which are like, because of the names on the videos, for example, and these kind of things, it does much better than most other tools.
Yeah. I mean, do you not just have a, what do you call this? A kind of banner below with mute, stop cam, settings, present, invite. And if you click present, it's just share screen, and then a window comes up. And then you just click share screen and share window.
I'm not sure if my Mathematica to Firefox Sandbox relation is blocking us. So what is the reason why I cannot? Shouldn't I see my screen, what I share myself when?
Yeah, you more likely, you'll be able to see what you are sharing. You won't be able to see any of us. That's how it happened when I did it last time.
If you share,
I need to click on Bildschirm teilen here. I'm sorry, this is my fault. I need to click here. That I invite you to do that, and I have to initiate that. I thought you would click management-wise something. My fault. I have no. So this is now I allow. This was an allow. Now I have this thing to be shared.
I see it. So
can you transmit that to the others, please? Now and yes, here we go. So we, of course, close that window.
Of course.
And now you should be able to to see the Mathematica document full screen. Do you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Thank you. So this is iSpace and exact G from Coulomb constant and basically nothing presentation. My name is Christian G. Wolf, and I found that on an old Mac, which was my primary iSpace machine at the time. It's a document from 2018, which I brushed up today a little bit, as you can see here in the current date. But all I did is add some formatting. It had not a title, nothing, and it's quite short. When we would have a PDF of that, you would see it is 20 A4 pages of PDF. It has a small footer, everything in between. We will have a look line by line. The Mathematica kernel, which I fired up here, is a Mathematica version, not the newest one, 12.1.1, which is just right for the MacBook Air machine I have here, but it will run on any Mathematica, even a very old one, or a new one, but whatever you have there, it should just run. And if you have no Mathematica, then please use the attached PDF, which I sent with the email prior to today's invitation. So let's start with something. We want to derive an exact G from an per definition exact Coulomb constant of the SE, and basically nothing. And nothing I will have to explain a little bit with respect to the iSpace integer geometry later when you see that. If you have the feeling that is not nothing, then let me know. Okay. From my point of view of iSpace 20 years experience, is actually nothing. So we start with a simple geometric thing of iSpace. We have to define the iSpace circular number 3 to be 3. And I do that here. And you see the in value. Oh, I see I have Mathematica here as equation 6500. So this unfair, I reset the kernel. So I say quit kernel local. And we completely start that as an empty document, that we have the true impression or the code has changed, and we let the Mathematica kernel restart from scratch. And the only implementation it currently has should be that what we are calculating line by line. That is the idea. So shift return is the Mathematica command for input, and as you see, it's evaluated P3 is 3 to the output 3, and here you can now see into, out to, because in 1 is the title. So this is of course also a cell, but this is meaningless. Now max n is the maximum number of numerical digit precision we want. That is of course always the pun with the 42 here. I could use any number, but it should be higher than 25 or 30 even, that you see certain effects in the numerical mantissa, like when you have numbers which have 9 digits and you square them, you got 18s, and if you do the power of 4, you get quickly to 30, 35 digits. And to see that the rest of these numbers are 0, which is an iSpace effect which is desired, that you see that you quantize something and there is no more geometry in the number, then you need such a high digit impression, but likely not higher, very rarely more than 42 digits. The I prime is the number 6961, which is a prime number. And as we know now by today's knowledge, 1 over 6961 is the quantum of time in iSpace-IQ unit system. But at the time when I wrote that, I didn't know that. So for me, it was just the magic prime number 6961, and we leave it for that in the calculation here. We have to define some units where Mathematica is extremely helpful. As you can see, I can define a variable meter. I don't do shortcuts with MS and so on, because the short variable names are easy to be mismatched. Programmer guy, and I can mix the number 1 the string meter in one variable, and Mathematica shows that. So we have 1 meter in 1 second, 1 watt here, and these are the iSpace as a unit system. It's the same numerical value.
Christian, you're roboting a bit.
Sorry?
You're roboting a bit. You know, the like glitchy sound quality. I don't know if you're able to.
What do you mean roboting? Is it?
Oh, it's a turn where your voice is like sort of stopping and starting. You know, it's like blocky, like digital.
I'm at the headset with the maybe I should use not the headset then. If our
Yeah.
voice is not good, I remove the headset. Okay, let me try that without headset.
Great, that should do it. I switched the voice. No, I don't think we can hear you. Does it? Or you're muted anyway. So I think is it your input volume you need to turn up? Anyway. Yeah, you're still muted. I don't think I haven't muted you. I don't think I can do that. So maybe you have to select the device or. Sorry, I was muted as well. Yeah, maybe you have to
hear you.
come back in to do that then. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Christian switched off his microphone. Christian, you must switch on your microphone.
Oh yeah, you're muted, Christian. We can't hear you. You could put it in the chat. Yeah, you should just go down to T9 and click that. See if that works. Bottom left of the screen or bottom right? I'm not sure. Probably bottom left. Okay. Yeah. Oh, so it's just on mute because he has no microphone. I think that's what he's saying. So it sounds like you need to select the device. I know you can do that when you sign in, and originally it tests your microphone. Oh, you.
Sorry, it was the web app. My fault. It's auto mute. Losing the microphone. Now, this is I don't know the app well, so this is a full show of StreamYard, which we learned now.
Okay, great.
I will go back to internal and switch the Bluetooth off again so you have the best voice.
Great.
I'll be back in few minutes. I had to go, like 5 minutes.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we can make a break 5 minutes if you want, no problem.
How is audio?
Auto mutes when it changes audio. That is not clever, actually. I didn't ask it for it. Automatically does that. But you can hear me now.
So you have ton ein and ton aus. So that's mute and unmute.
Unton aus, exactly. It's Command D. But it when I remove the Bluetooth headset, it automatically mutes the sound and doesn't tell me by a balloon or something. It does it hidden, so I don't recognize that it mutes me.
Oh yeah, if you're sharing your screen and all that.
Yeah, exactly. It's behind the shared screen, so I cannot see that, and that is not very clever.
Like in the advertisement. You know it from the TV?
Yeah, a bit.
Da ist ja. Hello.
Oh, we don't have that ad here, unfortunately.
Yeah, no problem. We are here to learn all these things, and what we do professional, not to say that it's not professional what we do, but when we have millions of clients, then we cannot do unprepared these kind of things and search for our microphones. That has just to work.
Right. So, while we're here, actually, if you could like make the wording a bit bigger as well. Is that possible? Will it wrap around on?
Absolutely. So I haven't thought about that yet either. So of course, last time when I presented, I can also easily go to 200% or something. And
can you make it wrap around the screen, or is that possible? Like the text wrapping. I mean, see the way it goes off the screen a bit, or is that not?
I'm not sure if I can do that because Mathematica is a bit. I can try, and I have to basically go to full screen for that window.
Yeah. Maybe squash the screen down.
Is this helpful? Yeah.
That's much better. Oh yeah.
Okay. Something will, and now it's red. Okay. Good. Perfect. Yeah, just tell me I'm also learning these things. I'm used to present on HD screens, and on HD screens my things fit in a horizontal formatted A4 or A3 format, compressed best on the screen and on the paper. And I always try to format my documents that they are A4 or A3 printable.
Right.
And that is not always the best for a presentation with a flow when zooming in. But of course, yes, for zooming in, Mathematica has special fonts even for better presentation. I just don't use them because then everything has to be on automatic formatting. And some of my equations look not well after that automatic formatting. I prefer a more mathematical style with a true horizontal dash for divisions and that kind like traditional TEGS looks on a printout.
Okay, great. Well, I had a look at some of your equations there, Christian, especially further down, and they get pretty complicated.
They get pretty complicated, and when you don't format them properly, you see nothing. Yeah, this is
fair enough. Yeah.
They are not as complicated as they look like, but they are extremely good examples how complicated it can get when you try to remove all variables which are shortcuts. When you want to see the true naked values, you have to replace each and every value recursive by the one which it represents until you see just algebra with no definitions inside whatsoever.
Yeah, it is interesting.
That gives interesting insight into the physics when you do that, actually, because all these clever nabla and rod operators, for example, hide a lot of that, what is going on in quantum mechanics, by shortcutting the math to death, essentially, until you don't understand it anymore. The people who do understand that, of course, pretend that they need to write it that way to save time on communicating, and I understand that argument as well. But then to talk to these guys, you have to have the same mathematical and training logically and the same experience. So when you work on your doctor degree stuff for 4 years, you might have for some time the experience to do that properly. But looking 10 years later in your own documents, you might not have it anymore when you do it that way. So I'm a guy who is not trying to shortcut things when not necessary. If there is something, I write it down as it is and do not shortcut it, so that everyone will understand it even 100 years later. Smartness is not elegant when you look it from a test and knowledge perspective.
Your notebook ran very well without error.
It should. Yeah. It's a very simple one, and these simple notebooks should just run through when you had the time. You have a Mathematica, yes, get this good, and you run it through, it should just work.
Great. So can you get a free version of Mathematica? Because it's pretty expensive, isn't it?
No, it's not expensive, but you cannot get a free except on a Raspberry Pi. On a Raspberry Pi, for 40 euros, you have a full-fledged 12.1 or 12.2 Mathematica version. And on a Raspberry Pi 4, that is quite fast, actually. The problem with Mathematica is not the kernel. The kernel is so well implemented in C and partially C++ and assembly language that the kernel does not need much RAM and computing power. It was optimized to run on a 68,000 CPU 35 years ago. So it is really 8 megahertz and a 8000 CPU from Motorola were way enough to run a kernel. The problem is the UI. And the UI of Mathematica has this folding interface where you have seen here, where you can fold things back. When I double click these lines here, then they fold and says here definition. Now I folded the whole document into a very short 1A4 page that you can go chapter by chapter. So Mathematica's UI is a folding editor, And that in its own would also not be more complex than, say, Microsoft Word or a web browser, but you deal with these mathematical fonts. And when you have all these mathematical fonts in TrueType and size that up, and you need caches for the different font sizes, and you do scaling effects like this, then the computing power you need to do that fluently explodes. And if you're not on a very fast 4-core Intel machine, you just have to wait all the time by reformatting the fonts. And the deal breaker with Mathematica is hence not the computing power, but you need, for presenting it and for effectively working with it, a very fast machine. Because the UI is so real-time burden, and it's also the syntax coloring. Mathematica has an excessive set of syntax coloring. You see that we have a blue IC here and a black equation. And the black equation means it's text, and the blue equation means it's not evaluated yet. So it's blue. So when I press Shift Return here, it becomes black in real time. And that seems easy, but that is not at all easy, because it's not hard-coded in C or another language. So all these kind of UI, call it tricks, are actually implemented in the Wolfram language itself. They are rules, mathematical rules. And when you have thousands or millions of rules, you need a very fast machine to evaluate those rules in user real time. But to answer your question, Mathematica is available on the web, for example. You can, as any cloud software, get it for, I think, 10 euros in the month, and you have a cloud Mathematica. I don't like it because I want to use it also in an offline mode in any way. So there is no other deal breaker than buying a student version of Mathematica or the education version, which is perfectly fitting for our job. And that costs about 300 euros, and that's it. And that 300 euros is fully cross-platform. You have to choose which platform you want at a given time, but you can run it on a Mac, you can run it on Windows, and you can run it even on Linux, which is harder than on Windows, because the graphics libraries on Linux are not at all on par yet with that ones on Mac, let alone that on Windows. On Windows, you have OpenGL 4.2 and the DirectX 12, I think, or something, and you can do powerful things in the arena there with these physics. And the Linux is way away from that. But Wolfram always does the versions cross-platform, and whether you run on Linux, Windows, or Mac should not matter in theory, in best case. There were versions where it did matter, but they were a little bit lazy in between on version 6 to 10. But from version 11 on, everything is fixed, and it's just really working truly cross-platform. It is that much cross-platform that you don't even see a difference for most of the equations, whether you run it in a web browser as a cloud version or not. And this is really impressive, because the web browser doesn't transmit the image like a video game. Most of these server versions run it on a server and then transmit just the video and the keyboard. So, but they run it fully locally in JavaScript implementation. So the whole of Mathematica is suddenly implemented in JavaScript instead of in C. And it's just in time, real-time compiled. This is really nuts complex what they're doing there. It works very, very well.
What is the definition of just in time?
Just in time means that you press return and want an answer within milliseconds and not within 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. But how is that implemented?
With good programming and not with shitty software, not written in Python, not written in languages which shouldn't be. They are extremely talented mathematicians and physicians, but they are much more talented programmers. And the Wolfram language is a designed system that has been 35 years by Dr. Stephen Wolfram himself, curated which commands go inline and which not. And when they implement a command, of course, it's not inline in the kernel. It's a library, a subset, say a couple of 200 Wolfram language lines and a couple of 200 C lines or something. And when it works very, very well, it gets to Wolfram Alpha. And in Wolfram Alpha, it's stress tested by real people's input. And when it survives that, the combined version of that in form of a high implementation can also be assembly language if necessary. Then they implement it in the Wolfram language and the kernel core. And then it's there forever. Then it's a command which is intrinsic. It is not a library anymore. So Mathematica suddenly knows that command firsthand. And that means it's 1,000 times faster because it doesn't need to parse anything. There is no intermediate library or JavaScript basic interpreter like intermediate step. And the Wolfram language has now 35,000 commands, but in the beginning it had only 1,500 about. But that 1,500 were so well structured that they are still forward and backward compatible between version 1 and version 12.2, which we have now. And no other language I know of has accomplished that. C is very compatible to itself, is also very portable, but the libraries of C are not at all. C++ is in theory even more portable and well designed, but libraries of C++ are a complete mess and are not portable.
Okay.
Yeah, I just came in.
They're tricky.
Rajan, thanks for being back.
Yeah, I will check. I might have lost about 10 minutes, but I can check.
No, we have waited for you, and I will continue the presentation. I can also restart it from scratch if you want, that we have a linear sequence going down again.
Just highlight, I appreciate. Thanks a lot.
Okay, I got the feedback from Christopher to zoom in, and hopefully the font size is now much more readable. So I will again cancel the kernel with kernel local and start from scratch. I start the kernel and evaluate the first expression. You always see that evaluation is done when the blue color of the variable name, in this case pi3, becomes black, and hence the kernel then has learned. I press Shift Enter in Mathematica. This is for historical reasons, which means evaluate this line. And it did it. It was the first evaluation and the first output, and we have now defined pi3 is 3. We define maximum number of numerical digit precision, max n, to be 42 digits. We define the I prime 6961. This is the magic prime, identified to be the quantum of time in iSpace-IQ unit system in iSpace units. We have a definition for the meter, 1 meter as a string, but logically it's an object. So get 1 second, 1 volt, and 1 ampere, which are the only 4 core physical units you need for all of physics. And that is not my opinion. That is just the nature of unit systems itself. So when you have a kilogram, you might think that is something special, but kilogram is nothing else than volt ampere second to the power of 3 over square meters. Coulomb is not coulomb, but just ampere times second. Ohm is not ohm, because it's just for the recognition of these honorable persons, but it is just volt over ampere. And when you leave all that honorable stuff out, you end up with these 4 units for physics, and you don't need more, because everything is constructed from that. Volt ampere times second is a joule, is energy. Volt ampere times seconds over meter is force, is Newton. And here you go. This is very, very simple. And this is how we work in iSpace-SI unit system. Now we define the speed of light to be that what is in the SI unit system, and call it EC for iSpace-C speed of light. Now here comes a true iSpace only value. The IEMF is the iSpace electronic mass factor, and believe it or not, this is the electron mass in iSpace-IQ units. It is an integer. And the former video which I made on the TEGS, and of course the papers on ResearchGate, prove all that what I'm saying here. This is just a didactically interesting subset of the iSpace which we check here out today, to see how it typically works when I work with that in practice. Now we define something is also very old, an I time. At that time, I had no idea about the quantum of time. So I had these strange prime numbers, 47, and the prime number 40,665,487. And when you multiply these two, you get the combined number 689,277,889. But as we know now, this is completely unphysical. This is an SI artifact. And I flat, this is 10 to the power of 24. When you combine that in this next simple equation, I time over I prime over I flat in form of second, you get something called ITB, iSpace base time. This is a true iSpace only value. No other theory is talking about iSpace base time in any book or anywhere else. And when you calculate the numerical value of it, you see that it's a very, very small time, 9.901 to the power of minus 20 seconds, or in hertz, 1.009 to 10 to the power of 19 hertz. When you multiply this iSpace spacetime, you remember we have the combined units. We multiply ampere and a second together and take the golden ratio for the ampere. We get this ratio here, which looks unphysical at first sight. And when we take the numerical value of that by adding an n here, we suddenly see it's the electron charge, 1.6021768. And up to here, it is like the number in the books, to that precision, out of nowhere, out of an equation from the assumption of a quantum of time and the golden ratio. And this means this iSpace spacetime consists of a physical part, 1 over I prime, 1 over 6961 iSpace seconds, and a conversion factor part. And that is I time over I flat, seconds per iSpace second. And this conversion factor is the magic with which iSpace is able to derive all other constants of nature. Now, I told you nothing will be able to, or nearly nothing, convert the Coulomb constant into G. And here is the equation for which I call is nothing. Now, that is arguably not nothing, but look at the simplicity. First of all, you notice when you look carefully, we have exponents over nearly every value or every bracket. Here's an exponent, strangely written 2 times 3. Here's pi to the power of 2 times 5, so pi to the power of 10, golden ratio to the power of 6. Here you see a bracket, which is to the power of 2 times 1 only. Here you see a bracket, which is to the power of 18, 2 times to the power of 9. Here you see a bracket, which is 2 to the power times 4, so to the power of 8. And here you see another physical entity, which is 2 to the power of 2. So what I wanted to say is, when you carefully watch, every one of these factors in the exponent has an even value named 2. When you want to take the root of this equation, you just remove the 2 here. Then you take the root. When you make the 2 to a 1, then the exponent goes down by 1 and you root effectively the value. And you can do that here, 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 and here. Would we have, for example, pi to the power of 7? We could not do that. Pi to the power of 7 is not natively iSpace rootable because the root of 2 is not an iSpace value. The root of 2 is like taking a Lego piece and truncating it by half. Then you get the diagonal line, but the Lego piece is defect afterwards. While mathematically, of course, you can do that. Such operations are forbidden in iSpace. And a native iSpace application or equation shows itself up in a proper way that all of its values are rootable. And this is one. And the exponents are quite high. For example, to the power of 18 is at first sight unphysical. And this is just 2 times 3 times 6961 to the power of 18. And here we have small geometry, root of 2, root of 3, root of 5, times 2 times pi 3 times 1 volt. This is a unit volt in the smallest circle of the high space. And to the power of 2. And of course, the geometry of golden ratio to the power of 6 and pi to the power of 10 are, when you have read or followed my papers, the geometric input factor of the gravitational constant. And this is why this works. So this is the geometry of G, and everything else is some integer geometric filler, which we have to understand step by step now what that actually is and why that works. But nothing in the sense there is no further numbers in. Here is the 111,113. Here's the iSpace basetime, as I showed. Here is the speed of light, 297,92458, and nothing else. Here we have a factor 10 over 3, which I believe is 10 dimensions over 3 dimensions, but that is just an interpretation. And that interesting number here is also part of the electron mass. So that has something to do with that. Anything else is unspectacular from my point of view. That gives this rather really big ratio. Yeah. But you can make it a little bit easier and make it numerically. And let's see when we evaluate what it gives. So it gives this out 17 value, and the numerical value of it is 1.346 to the power of 20, and has a rather strange unit. Second to the power of 8, volts to the power of 2, meters to the power of 4, and anybody on its sane mind, including me, would say, well, that is not really something looking physical. If it is physical or not, we can just not tell, but looking physical, surely not. We take the inverse of it for the sake of checking always if there is some mantissa effects visible, which are not, and go on. Now, we ask Mathematica, dear Mathematica, what is the gravitational constant as is stored in the books at the moment? And to do that, you have this nice orange equal here that can be reprogrammed, and is a question to Wolfram alpha, actually. So when I press shift return here, it pulls in the HTML of the following box, and is telling us, I assume you mean the gravitational constant as a unit. We assume 1g, Newtonian gravitational constant, and give me a numerical value of 6.674 to the power of minus 11 Newton meter squared per kilogram squared, or they can do that in dyne per centimeter per gram, or in some nasty foot to the power of 3 per slug second squared. So Mathematica can very well handle units, and there are all kinds of crazy units stored in Wolfram alpha, automatically evaluated. And physically, the dimensions of G are 1 over a mass, a length to the power of 3, and a squared 1 over a squared time. And that gives, when you evaluate it, Newton meter squared kilogram squared, or in iSpace volt ampere, meter to the power of 5 by volt ampere second to the power of 5. And now let's see, we have the same equation than before. So it was essentially this bracket. Yeah, that was the equation from before, that what I called nothing. And we add the 5-digit numerical value, including error bar, as spit out by Mathematica, and change the units a little bit. So this is just a numerical value. I could give it directly the units which Wolfram said, Newton meter squared. But let's do it a little bit different. Assume that this value here is a force for a second. Just we assume it's a force. So I say this numerical value is volt ampere second per meter. That would be a force. But then the unit would not be correct. And to make the unit correct, we need a unit correction factor, which is exactly this to the power of 2. Volt ampere second to the power of 5 over cubic meter is not anything physical either, because volt ampere second to the power of 3 over square meter would be kilogram. But whatever that is cubed is just formally, mathematically, that what you need to get the proper unit for the result. And the proper unit for the result is volt meter over ampere second. And here you can already see it. We took that value, which is based on the assumption of the above equation, which I called nearly nothing, multiplied the measurement value of SI system, and what we can see is 8.98755 to the power of 9 volt meter ampere second. And when you're a trained physicist, you know what that is. That is the Coulomb constant. Is it really the Coulomb constant? Well, let me see. This is the result we get with the precision of Mathematica. We get only 6 digits out because we only put 6 digits in. So we don't have to do any digit precision tracking. Mathematica is fully doing that for us. So this is not an exact value yet, but we have now hypothesis. Now let's check for a moment what the units can do for us. When we do a unit simplify command in Mathematica, I said, what is actually volt ampere second per meter? The force which I wanted it to be, over 1 over volt ampere second to the power of 5 meter to the power of 3 squared. And it does unit calculations now, not numerical one. And the unit coming out is meter to the power of 5, ampere second to the power of 9 volt. And that is interesting. Why is that interesting? Because the unit we want for G is meter to the power of 5 over ampere second to the power of 5 volt. And we have, so to speak, a power of 4 seconds too much. And when we have a power of 4 seconds too much, we can rewrite that equation in a different way. We say this still again that volt-ampere second per meter, and assume this is an acceleration. Look what I'm doing here. This is just algebra. I took the second to the power of 5, and the superfluous meter here is second to the power of 2 too much, and this is meter too much. But when I put the second down, I get 1 meter over second squared, and meter per second squared is an acceleration. And that is physics. Here we have a force now, and that is physics. And here we have volt-ampere second to the power of 3 per square meter, which is a mass. And here we have physics to the power of 2. So now we have a sensible iSpace unit, which 3 physical entities combined give the unit we need, which we have received by the evaluation of this attempt to see if it is the Coulomb constant or not. That can be simplified. When we add the second to the power of 4 here and multiply it in, we get the desired unit of G we want. So as you can see, here we still have second to the power of 9, but when we multiply arbitrary second to the power of 4 into the unit equation, we have now suddenly the proper unit of G. And when we want to keep that, we can rearrange that again. It's just algebra what we'll do here. And when we a little bit simplify that under the square, so the power of 4 is solved to a square, the meters per second is a speed. Meters per second squared smells formally to the speed of light. Yeah, can you see it? You have G times the speed of light squared times a force gives the desired unit. So playing with the volt-ampere second meter gives direct access to the physics of the underlying equation, which you cannot just see except you're a total genius, like on Feynman level, where you can see that maybe if you say Coulomb, ohm, kilogram, and all that. For myself, I cannot do that. Hence, I always just work with the native units volt-ampere second meter. And you see how easy that actually is. Much, much easier to understand. Now we simplify that in an algebraically better form. We put the meter to the second to the power of 4 here, have a force squared here, and still get the same value. When we rearrange it still a little bit more, in that we take the meters under a common square, we have a squared equation where a meters per second squared and a force is multiplied with another force. Does you remind that of something? The Planck force is defined as c to the power of 4 over g. This is certainly not g, but this is a force squared. And here we have a force. So if we force squared cancels with the force, and we put it on the left side, and we put the unit of g from here, below you have the Planck force equation in this bracket. And on the left side, you have a force, the quantum of gravitational force. And that works out. So the final equation is meters per second to the power of 4 over the force gives g, which is obviously correct. But that was just an excursion to see how useful that unit arrangements are and how easy it is to use in Mathematica with unit simplify. You can do that on a piece of paper and a pencil yourself, but don't do that. Use Mathematica. It's so much easier, and you don't make silly beginner's mistakes. Now let's check the Coulomb constant. What has Mathematica Wolfram Alpha to say for the Coulomb constant? Is evaluated, and it says 1 Coulomb constant is 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 and has the numerical value of 8.988 to the power of 9 meters per farad. Now, farad is a capacitance, but of course a farad can also be defined as volt-ampere second and meters easily, and is geometrically a complex unit dimension, a mass times a length to the power of 3 over a time to the power of -4 over a time over a current to the power of -2. And this shows the weaknesses of the SI system because the ampere was later added to that, hence the mean current here. Yeah? While dimensional analysis like that is very, very useful, I don't need it or like it in iSpace. I stick here with simple volt-ampere second meter is much, much more effective than playing around with the typical dimensional analysis. You should be able to do that to understand your physics, but this is not the best way to treat units because the mass implicates kilogram or electron volt, and you don't even know what it is implicitly meant with. And this is a very big difference if you're talking kilogram or electron volt over c squared for that matter, then it's the same. But most physicists leave the c squared away, and then it's not at all the same. Here in iSpace, you cannot make these mistakes. So we define a mu0, iSpace mu0 is 4 pi over 10 to the power of 7 volt second per ampere meter, because this is exactly the way what the SI committee has defined. The CODATA committee has defined the mu0 until 2018, as I said, when they made this a measurement value and epsilon 0 also a measurement value. But for the argument of that, let's think we have still 2017, and then this is the perfect correct equation. And the paper is from 2018 and has not any idea that this transit would have come at that year. The numerical value is exact because this is exact per definition 4 pi to the 10 power of 7, and it's inverse. Historically, the 4 pi comes from 2 times 2 pi, which means the circular attraction of 2 infinite long wires 1 meter away, which have a, depending on polarity and voltage, attracting or outgoing force. And the 10 to the power of 7 was a more or less arbitrary definition by the SE committee, is a radiant of the equator from Earth to the North Pole, about the length which they thought it is about. And there is no further magic behind that. Now, c squared is a physical definition, is 1 over mu0 times epsilon 0. We have not defined epsilon 0 yet, so I call it epsilon 0x at the moment. So we have left side is not equal to right side. There's something missing. So we solve for epsilon 0 and make it 1 over mu0 c squared, standard equation of the textbooks, and we get the exact mu0 of SI and also of iSpace. They are compatible. And the numerical value of the epsilon 0 is, of course, this. The inverse of that is this. Nothing new here, nothing special. Now the Coulomb constant is defined as 1 over 4p epsilon 0, as we have already been told here by Wolfram, but of course we know that also from the textbooks and by our own physical education. We calculate that, and you see this long integer number here, and of course there is c squared hidden in there from the equation here by the definition. Very easy to see. When you look on the numerical value, for the first time you understand that you got something quantized, because these will be zeros up to infinity. And while the exponent goes only to the power of 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it does mean it is a quantized value. There is no more geometry in here. This is just the numerical value of c squared. And the inverse of it is this. And with the inverse of it, you suddenly do not see it anymore, that is quantized. And this is the main reason why I always calculate the n numerical value and the inverse numerical value of it. Would I have calculated that value for the first, I would not have seen that there are so many zeros in here. And the magic of iSpace is to find values in relations between constants of natures where you hit zeros. And when you hit them, you strip the geometry of the constants of nature, and then you suddenly understand the true physical integer geometric relation. This is all about the mechanics of running iSpace equations. Now let's see what happens. We have now equation 42 here, which is really just coincidental. I didn't intend to do that. And we repeat it from the above to have it here. We have the number, we have the volt ampere second per meter, we have the intended unit, which we had to correct it. And what we get out by this input numerical value here is the presumed Coulomb constant. Now, when this is difficult to see for you on the screen, this is exactly the equation which we had on screen before, up to here, which I called nothing. And when we scroll down, this is a little bit rearranged. What did I do? we have a value called iSpace basetime here. And in the next equation, this gives, of course, the same value. I just voluntarily took the iSpace basetime from here and put it as an expanded integer numerical value in the bracket, because the unit in the bracket before was just over 1 meter here. And that over 1 meter suddenly becomes, due to the change of the iSpace basetime, 1 meter per second. Now we have a speed here. And that speed is 1 over 47 times 10 to the power of 49 at 42 meters. And that is interesting. What is that? When you calculate that, you find that it's 9.9 to the power of minus 20 second per meter, and second per meter is not our human training. So what is the inverse of that? And when we calculate that, you see there's a speed involved of 1 to the power of 19 meters per second. And all due my TEGS friends, last time I looked, this is way above the speed of light. This has to do with exactly the same thing which I showed in the original iSpace video, where the exponent was to the power of 27, but is the same root cause in it. So there is really, when you track units carefully with your iSpace input equations and make sense, and you have no choice, because this is an exponent to the power of 8 here. So I need here c to the power of 8 one way or another, or that wouldn't work. This is not just a mock-up value which you can place arbitrarily. Once you pull the units together with your numerical values in the same equation, and only within Mathematica you can do that really elegant and easy, you suddenly see you have no choice. That must be a speed, and that is a tremendously fast speed. And when I'm right, that is the speed of gravity. This is what gives us all the EPR effects, and what is Christopher is currently, it's a pity that he has no time to join, but maybe he is able to look at later. He's currently writing a paper on this superluminous quantum substance, let's call it substance, which is, in other words, an ether, if you want it or not. Yeah. So there is a medium, and that medium is 10-dimensional or 6-dimensional subspace embedded inside the normal 4-dimensional spacetime cells. And according to this equation, as everything in this equation except the roots is discrete, the medium is necessarily also discrete. Because what we get when we go on with that value is we can make an equation here. We say equal Coulomb constant numerically, and Coulomb constant numerically is an exact value. So when we evaluate the next one, we see that the left side value, 8.98755 10 to the power of 9 meter volt ampere second, on the right side already evaluates to, of course, the correct Coulomb constant. And when we have a G measurement value on the left side with proper physics, proper units, proper exponents, in a super simple equation like that, on the left side we can pull the G out and just do a little bit algebra. We get the numerical value for that. And here you go, G, 6.674112408 to the power of minus 11 meter to the power of 5 ampere second to the power of 5 volt. And that is not just some new value for G again. That is exact the G value which you get by the other implementation, which goes over alpha to the power of 10, 1 over Rydberg times electron charge over the power of 4, times 1 over mu 0, 2p mu 0, times the quantum of gravitation IFG, which I presented in the Prague Wolfram IMS conference as a conference paper, and which is the basis for all that which is G-based, especially the Planck constants in iSpace in the last 10 years. The numerical value here, which we get, is just a different arrangement. There is not much changed, except that the multiplicated exponents get now aggregated here to make a algebraically simpler version, which gives the true geometry. And as we have to take the root You see now why we needed to do that. From our power of 18, we now have a power of 9. From our power of 2, we have a power of 1. From a power of 8, we have a power of 2. And from a power of 4, we have a power of 2 without physically involving any root by just subtracting from the exponent. Very, very elegant stuff, from my opinion. And we have the iSpace G derived from Coulomb constant now as a full ratio, as a rational number. And the geometry, as I told, was GoldenRatio to the power of 6, pi to the power of 10, and a large number with a lot of zeros, and yet another large number. And we can later have a look in detail on how to frac this up, but we don't need to, because here is an equal sign, and you already see what it is. It's Coulomb constant divided by this thing, and not more, and gets you the perfect G, not just some G, the perfect G. Now let's do that in a different unit system. We did it now in SI, now let's do it in iSpace-IQ. For iSpace-IQ unit systems, we define as an iSpace meter is 1 iSpace meter. We define as an iSpace second, it's 1 iSpace second, an iSpace volt, 1 iSpace volt, and an iSpace ampere. So we take the exact same equation and have now an IQ unit system G derived from iSpace-SI Coulomb constant, which is nothing else than the one we have derived. So that one here is just this thing. We say we take that and multiply it due to our theory that only the time is the trick between iSpace-IQ units and iSpace-SI units for all entities. There are no other conversion factors. It is just the quantum of time. And here you have the ITB in second. This is SI. And 1 over 6961 iSpace second is IQ. And when we divide that, we need to do it to the power of 5. Why? Yeah, because the unit value of G is meter to the power of 5 divided by ampere second to the power of 5 volt. And in iSpace, I said, if you have a second and you want to convert from IQ to SI, divide that nonsensical human artifact factor of SI to the power of seconds out of your equation. And this is what we do here. To the power of 5, we divide it out, and the remaining units stay, of course. So volt and iSpace volt is a 1-in-1 relationship. Ampere and iSpace ampere is a 1-in-1 relationship. The numerical and geometric values do not change between these unit systems. This is a misconception of most of other unit systems, that they think a foot is not the same than a meter or something because the foot is arbitrarily long. Has nothing to do with that, because the true length quantized is canceling out and gives always a 1. So it doesn't matter how long your foot is. In the sense, you can do it with foot or with meter or with whatever you want. It always works in a quantized way. And that is a big recognition, which is not wide known. And here's the iSpace meter per meter to the power of 5. And when we do the calculation, we get now the iSpace value. And we have now an iSpace-IQ derived value from iSpace-SI Coulomb constant in iSpace units, and said that is the same. It's true. So this seems to be our correct equation. We make a numerical value for that for the sake of completeness. But of course, we have no way to judge from psychology, is that the right or wrong value, because we have not feelings from school about iSpace values. But the unit is correct. iSpace meter to the power of 5, iSpace ampere, iSpace second to the power of 5, iSpace volt. And now let's focus on the ITBHA, the iSpace base time human artifact factor. That is just I time over I prime over I flat. And in explicit form, you get this number that is that numerically and the inverse. And now we add it to the equation. Here we add it to the equation explicitly to the power of 5. And what we want to understand now with that is what actually is the difference between the Newtonian G in iSpace-IQ units and the one in SE. So we divide the IQ-G derived from iSpace-SI Coulomb constant by that thing here, correct it with the iSpace-IQ base time artifact factor, but that is Coulomb constant from SE, numerically over voltmeter ampere second that it has a unitless value, and give it the iSpace value. So we convert the SI value to the iSpace value without changing the numerical value of it. This is important. This is still the numerical value of the iSpace-SI Coulomb constant as defined in the books. Have the exact same equation, take the compensation factor, and get a very, very small value back. Here is out 61. We have a unit now, which we have not expected. We see iSpace second to the power of 8, meter to the power of 8, iSpace meter to the power of 8, and second to the power of 8 means we have here two speed ratios. Here is the meter per second to the power of 8, so c to the power of 8, in a ratio to iSpace meter per second. So while the units in the G has suggested that the compensation of the time needs to run by a physical factor of the power of 5, because the result unit has shown meter to the power of 5 over volt ampere second to the power of 5, so the iSpace unit compensation factor should be the power of 5. The truth is, this is not the full story. The truth is the physical geometry going on is to the power of 8. And the power of 8 is, of course, much more logically explainable, because power of 8 means just 4-dimensional space-time to the power of 4 squared. And here you go. What is this value then here? Let's check what the value is by factor integer of that value. And now you should really applaud and stun, because it is just 6961 to the power of 10 and nothing else. Isn't that cool? So 6961 10-dimensional is the conversion factor between the iSpace-IQ unit G factor and the SI unit G factor, where all the people in all books still believe it has nothing to do with anything quantized, is a measurement value which cannot be explained, and for sure not derived by any equation. And we're only at equation 62, and we already did derive it. And we did nothing special. It was totally simple up to here, wasn't it? So while the Prague derivation of the iSpace G was surely a breakthrough for recognition and having a conference paper, this is the most elegant one calculation I can think of. So when you continue, you have now an IQG derived from iSpace-SI Coulomb constant with a correction factor, which was not at all clear. So when we want to understand what to the power of 8 we have a to the power of 10 here, so it doesn't fit. So we have 1 over 1 iSpace meter over 1 over 6961 iSpace second is, of course, quantum of time. So you have the quantized meter per second space, and what remains is the fourth root of 1 over 6961 meters per second, which is in its own a speed, then taken to the power of 8. So this is the best way where you can see how iSpace decodes your geometry, and you are enforced to do that because you pull the units. You have no choice. This is what leaves. And when you calculate that value, that is 0.109 meters per second. This is a very, very small speed. But this is now an iSpace speed. No, this is an SI speed. You understand what that is. 0.1 meters per second, anybody knows, is a very slow walking speed of a snail, maybe, or something. And the inverse of it. And of course, 1 iSpace meter over 1 over 6961 quantum of time iSpace second is nothing else than 6961 iSpace meter per second. And the inverse. And then that, for the sake of completion, to the power of 8. And if you do that rare thing to the power of 8, of course, the fourth root decompensates. And again, you see it's only 6961 squared numerical value, but to the power of 7 in the unit inverse second per meter to the power of 8. And for completion, but we're not done yet. So while that is really interesting stuff, the stunning stuff will just come up front. The fine structure constant in iSpace is mu0 times C1 over 2. This is a standard SI value. And the von Klitzing constant is 2 times pi 3 times 6961 volt over GoldenRatio ampere. So 1 over that gives that geometric value, which is nothing else than the fine structure constant, as the papers show all the time, which I had done when I reviewed the paper of Christopher and so on. It's all on ResearchGate. The inverse gives us the better understanding of the value, which up from here, 768 seems to derivate from the 1 somethings or 2 1 somethings where they cannot be sure. But that is due to the iSpace recognizes the phase change from Lego to Lego Duplo, or from sand to Lego. And in other words, from continuum to a discrete stuff. And this is the reason adapted for this difference. The iSpace-IQ Coulomb constant now is defined as 1 over 12 alpha. And that is just a really cool trick. And why 1 over 12 alpha? We need the value 299792458 to play with it, and don't have it. And when we don't have it, and it is in alpha, as you can see here, this is a half C, we can define Coulomb constant that way that we get the required numerical value 299792458 without defining it. It is in alpha, and alpha is valid in all unit systems, hence it's fully valid physics. Now, when we have a Coulomb constant defined that way in iSpace-IQ, we have now alpha in iSpace-IQ, Coulomb constant in iSpace-IQ, and we know what the iSpace space-time is in iSpace-IQ. And it's just 1 over 6961 iSpace second, the quantum of time. No human artifact correction factor. The numerical value of that, and its inverse, obviously, is an integer. The definition for the speed of light in iSpace-IQ units is GoldenRatio over 6961 iSpace meter per second. And here you might think, why isn't it actually GoldenRatio over 1 over 6961 iSpace meter per iSpace second? Because that is not the quantum of time. I said, bear with me, that explains itself soon. The speed of light can be split and written different as the quantum of time multiplied with GoldenRatio meter per second squared. But what is that? GoldenRatio meter per second squared is the quantum of acceleration in iSpace. So you don't see that that is the proper C. So now we understand physically what the number C, the speed of light, is actually composed of. The speed of light is composed of the quantum of time times the quantum of acceleration. And in iSpace, that is totally trivial to see, while in a normal physical system, in any other unit system with human ingredients, you would not at all see that. So we define that as IQA, quantum of acceleration, and learn something. And the quantum of acceleration has, of course, the numerical value of the GoldenRatio and its inverse, but it's physically a totally different thing because the quantum of time certainly doesn't go away. Now that we know that acceleration is quantized, time is quantized, length is quantized, everything is quantized. Do you see a pattern here? Okay, good. So in IQC, we say we have quantum of acceleration times quantum of time is true. And of course, that would be also true for the SI unit system. And we could now calculate with the compensated iSpace spacetime what is the quantum of acceleration in SI units. We'll do that later. IQG derived from iSpace-IQ Coulomb constant was this equation. And had that numerical value. This is just repetitive from above that we don't need to scroll up. But we can now do a ratio and divide that. We can say, and that is one of these crazy long programmer names, but I think it should be done that way. Now let's compose it. iSpace for I, Q for iSpace-IQ unit system, derived from iSpace-IQ Coulomb constant to IQG derived from iSpace-SI Coulomb constant ratio. So a ratio from the iSpace-IQ Coulomb constant to the iSpace-SI Coulomb constant. From ratios which are quantized in IQ, you can learn a lot when you try to understand what is actually the core physics of the SI to the IQ ratio. And when we calculate that, it's not visible at first sight, but we learn it's something GoldenRatio to the power of 9 times pi geometry. At least sounds interesting. It gets a numerical value, something crazy high, 8 to the power of 80 is the ratio. And the inverse, Nothing special here. We can factorize the large number. And if we do that, we see that it contains here 293,339. This is together with the 73, with the 7 and the 2, the speed of light to the power of 5. And this here, together with the 47 to the power of 3, is the iSpace spacetime. So what we learned is the iSpace spacetime to the power of 3 times c to the power of 5 is essentially the result of this equation. And without iSpace factoring of the numbers, you would never see that. So what is with the zeros? When we factor the zeros, we learn it is just 55 to 58 power of 10 plus a factor of 125. And that, of course, is due to typical automatic mathematical cancellation. What we mean with that is we can do that explicit now. We have the ITBH8, the iSpace spacetime human artifact factor to the power of 3, and divide it out of that factor. So it becomes easier. Now we have just the geometry remaining below the bar and above a much shorter value. That again has a numerical value, even higher to the power of 126, but that is not the point. It's just a number. When we factor that number again, we see suddenly we have 6961 to the power of 19, which we had in the initial equation. And this factor plus this factor times this factor times part of that factor gives c to the power of 5 and 6961 to the power of 19. And this we can write explicit. If we do that, then the IQG derived from iSpace-IQ Coulomb constant to IQG derived from iSpace-SI Coulomb constant ratio divided over iSpace spacetime human artifact factor to the power of 3, a long name, divided by what we derived from the factor analysis. So this to the power of 5, golden ratio to the power of 5, you remember? We had that equation, but that equation to the power of 5 here also had geometry with it. And the geometry was golden ratio to the power of 9, but that is not the full story. If we subtract 5 from this 9, then golden ratio to the power of 6 times pi would be the resulting geometry. And this is what the equation here proposes. So you get something to the numerical value of the speed of light, the golden ratio to the power of 5, and that in turn to the power of 5, which is 25, and multiplied by something 1 over golden ratio times 1 over 6961, quantum of acceleration inverse, quantum of time inverse to the power of 19. And now something really simple stays. The factor of that is just 2 to the power of 12, 5 to the power of 14, which I can now immediately see that comes from mu0. When you have something to the power of 14, which is a 10, then it's of course 4 pi divided by 10 to the power of 7, which is of course the Coulomb constant squared. And when we bring this in here as mu0 in form of 4 pi to the power of 7 squared, to get the same numerical result, we need to add the geometric factor of 2 times the root of pi to get an equal sign here. And if we do it properly, it's still true. So we did nothing wrong. But now we have a new geometric factor. 2 times root of 2 divided by 4 pi over 10 to the power of 7 squared. Golden ratio to the power of 3. Golden ratio to the power of 5 under something which we know as the speed of light factor. But remember from my first presentation, 299792458 over 10 to the power of 7 can also be the Planck resistance and has a unit volt per ampere and not meters per second. So we don't know that yet here from the units. Be very careful what you wish for. We check if that ratio is still true. It is true, so we did no in any way mathematical or cut and paste wise mistake. We simplified it a bit and pull the 299792458 still perceived human artifact out of this equation, pull it to the front. So now we have that to the power of 5 times a geometrical factor here, which stays. and put it on the left side. So we say this number to the power of 5 on the right side is the derived ratio divided by this geometry. When we put the power of 5 away, then on the right side, of course, we have to take the 5th root here. Purely formal. So now we get an equation for that human artifact number, which is the 5th root of the G derived from iSpace-IQ over the G derived from iSpace-SI times a geometric correction factor. Isn't that crazy? Things become simple again. And this is just adapted to the formatting. It looks a bit weird because that is why I'm normally, when I do this equation, would need to zoom in, and that you see something, please bear with me. I will have to really change the zoom factor back to 100%, that you see what the equation actually was meant to be. Yeah, we better see that in the PDFs maybe. So yeah, I use the PDFs for that, because the remaining equations will have that size, and this is purely of didactic effect, so it is not necessary to show you that. Here is very well written in the PDFs. And why I did that was to show, wanted to try, basically, here I can suppose easy zoom in without reformatting. So we were here, where it said this is the right side, and it gives a really complex looking expression, but it's not complex. I've just replaced the symbolic value with this part, which is this, the second symbolic value, which is this, over the equation. So we unroll now the complexity back optically to what is truly in. Now, you see here is, for example, still iSpace value in it, 47, 14, 60, 54, ever 7 over 10 to the power of 4 is the ITBPH. But everything else should cancel out to that number and is hence under the 5th root a unity, which is amazing, including the very strange, physically not yet explained 4th root over 1 over 6961 as a speed factor in SI. But physically, I have to write it that way or the units wouldn't fit. When you need really a bigger screen, fully expand that until no more variables are in, you end up with this. And from there, you can pull further 299, 792, 458 out, which have hidden in other variable names. So you get the 5th root of 1 over 299 to the power of 2 pulled out, and you can do that again. And you have the 5th root of that to the power of 3, 1 more pulled out. So all the numbers which are 299, 792, 458 need to be pulled out under the 5th root, which I'm sequentially doing here, just by letting Mathematica always prove that I didn't do it wrong. So we have the 5th root of 299, 792, 458 to the power of 8 over the 5th root of that to the power of 3. That can, of course, be combined. When you combine it, you have the 5th root of 299 to the power of 5. And here you now see where we end up, because the 5th root of 299, 792, 458 to the power of 5 is just that. And when you put it to the left side, you get 1 over 1. And that means this really big term on the right side is 1. Thank you. Which concludes my presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, that's amazing that it all equaled 1 in the end. I think Christian dropped out there. He's obviously run, no questions.
Oh, he went off.
Yeah.
But I checked the values with my model, and yeah. I got a correct result. Nearly the same results.
Yeah. So how did you do that? Did you just run the notebook, or did you put those equations into your own code and then?
No, in my model, I have 4 or 5 basic values which aren't changed anyway, and I took them from Christian's model and put them into my calculation, and I got the same, nearly the same results, about 10 to the minus 10 difference maybe. I have here a table, but moment.
Yeah, Christian, we thought you'd left. We thought you were like, I'm out.
Yeah, that was I wanted to stop the sharing of the screen, but pressed exactly the Studio Verlassen button, which was red and more prominent, which is also a not clever user interface design for a critical button. Yeah, with no further questions. Yes, well, are you sure? Boom, out. Thank you. So when you present to the millions public and you press the red button, you don't present to the millions public anymore, which is why that kind of UI is. I'm an IT expert, okay, not a physicist, and I really know how to do the things, and Apple also really knows how to do the things. But JavaScript programmers, sorry for all JavaScript programmers in the world, you really don't know how to do these things. Huh? So get a Mac, get a good book about how to do user interfaces before you even think putting buttons in front of people's screens. This is really not nice.
I will send my data to by email. Yes, it's the best solution, I think. I have a notebook and the 4 tables.
Yeah, these results are really interesting because when we calculated them, they converged with the iSpace values. The logical relative precision became better and not worse, which means the models are compatible and converge. That is not at all clear. That is normally not at all the case when you just arbitrarily change unit system or change different values. Then normally you diverge your values and not converge them.
Yeah, but you wanted to check my values, but
yeah, and then this little plaster came in between, and then I was not able to do that. Yeah, I'm really
waiting. I'm waiting for your result.
I know. That this was I really left 2 weeks of my physical lifetime in the hospital with this nonsense. Yeah, so that's why you haven't had that answer yet. I'm still fully on the top prior one to-do list.
Fair enough. So I was thinking we could have like everyone could have around 10 minutes or
yeah, would be good. I need a quick restrooms or something. 5-10 minutes would be good, and then we continue.
Well, yeah. Well, so what I was trying to say was 10 minutes. Like everyone would have 10 minutes questions, or just under 10 minutes. But if you want to take a break, that's okay because. So
then I need 5 minutes restrooms now, and surely you have questions, and I want the feedback of you. For me is very important. Did you really think I calculated with nothing, for example, or did you really? Were you able to follow the simplicity or the perceived simplicity from my point of view?
Yeah, that's basically one of my questions. So I think we'll take 5 minutes, and then because we might need the whole time in questions, some people might have less than 10 minutes questions. So
okay, thank you so much. But give me 5 minutes for the restrooms, and I don't.
Okay, so we'll be back.
I just leave. Okay, thank you.
Okay, 5 minutes. Okay. Everybody back home. Hello.
Hi, Rajan. So that was better now.
Yeah, it's quite interesting your presentation. What I suddenly find is there was a search gate. There is somebody called Toma, I think it's Toma, Gianco Toma. I can pull up that because it was, I just found it today because it's very close to what you are saying. So
This is good.
See.
I will put this paper as it is on my research page later. Yeah, today I don't have the time to anymore, but in the course of Monday or Tuesday, I will appear on the normal research get home with exactly that title. It complements the IMS 2015 presentation paper, which derives the G. So this is not, in a sense, spectacular like the G presentation at that time was completely new. This is just an algebraic different form of doing it, but albeit a really, in my eyes, much, much simpler one. This is super easy to understand. Why it is super easy to understand why it's discrete, because ICC is discrete, and it is also super easy to derive in only 68 linear equations out of nothing. And simplicity is always good.
Let me let me pull up. Where is it? Let me see. Yeah, it's right here. Can you see?
No, you're not sharing because.
I think Christopher might have to. When Christopher comes, he has to pull up that. So what he was saying is, I'll briefly describe, and when you see it, I can tell you more. Is that he's saying? Let me read his. The roots of gravity in electrodynamics. It's actually today he has uploaded, but actually he's last month. So what he's saying is that it's actually kind of a complementary thing. He's saying that you can connect G with all the the Coulomb constant. Essentially, what you're saying very similar. Coulomb constant, describes about the gravity and the vice versa. So there is a direct connection between gravity and the Coulomb constant.
This is quite clear why that is, Rajan, because when you know the old equation of mine, which I've derived a long time ago, about the relationship between alpha and alpha G. So the fine structure constant of gravitation is very well known. This is the electron mass squared over the Planck mass squared. And what most people don't recognize, they know that, but even a trained physicist often don't recognize this, is when you look into the books tell you that, for example, the Planck charge is E over the root of alpha. And this is nonsense. It is not E over the root of alpha. It is E squared over alpha. Okay? They can actually simplify to E over the root of alpha, but if the charge is quantized, you cannot take the root of a quantized golden ratio. This is not allowed. So you have to stay in the proper exponents, and my equations show that all of them, regardless if power of 2, 4, 8, or even 9, became the double of it, like 18, and then it's proper physics. This is what the geometry is really doing.
I have a different formula for this value. You know,
of course, cosmology could also have relations which you can get out of totally different relations. Yeah, of course.
Christopher, yeah. Can you let me in? I'm trying to share one screen.
Oh, sorry, I just got like sidetracked with.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Can you see now?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let me go there.
It's readable. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to increase the magnification?
No, it's okay. It's fully okay.
It's okay. Okay. So this is the research gate. Today I found out one Toma is from Italy, Giacomo. I found suddenly when I'm scrolling through the research gate,
Cool.
the roots of gravity in electrodynamics. The electrodynamics of electrically neutral bodies. So what he's doing is that he's saying that he's calculating the roots of gravity. It's May 6th, which is today, and two of the fundamental nature, electrostatic and gravitation, striking similarities. Coulomb's law and Newton's law of gravitation formally identical. Is it a coincidence? He's asking. So what he's doing is he's introducing the parameter here. So it's actually fairly long, but he has nicely separated into the thing. So I just scrolled through that, because there's not enough time. So I scanned through that, but I found it is quite interesting that what he's doing is that he starts from the Coulomb's law, which we know very well. Yeah. So from there, he starts deriving something, he's separating it out, and he introduces a factor or function called f. Because he says that the repulsion and the attraction, there is a asymmetry in that. They are not exactly the same. I think John found out in the north and south pole, the poles are asymmetric, but he's saying that the repulsion and the attraction has asymmetry. So he's introducing a parameter to take care of that. So this math he's going through, and I'm going to describe all that. So he defines a charge, a net charge, which is difference between the positive and the negative, and things like that. So he goes on, and he's saying the repulsive is a Coulomb constant times the charge, the normal things, the multiplication of the charges. But also for attractive, he introduces the factor f to take care of that thing, is that it's asymmetric. And then when he calculates all that, he goes through all these computations like you have done. He finds the force, resulting force, and everything, and then he calculates that, and then he comes up electric point. The electric field he finds from you can find easily from the force. So particular cases he talks about limiting cases that it limits to reduces to the normal Coulomb equations. So he's introducing that, and he says he introduces the gravitation field. So gravitation field is essentially a neutral force, right? So how do you connect the charge thing to the neutral thing? So he's now going through the calculation to show that, and the electrically neutral body. So he considers electrical neutral bodies to connect with the gravitational force. So he finds that this particular one, I don't know, he says he's assuming it. So that's the only question I have. But he connects with the Newtonian thing and the Coulomb law.
Yeah, Roger, when you put the electron mass instead of planetary masses there, and you put the radius of the root of the Bohr radius and the classical electron radius, which is nothing else than the Bohr radius times alpha, or the classical electron radius divided by alpha. then you get the equality between G and electrostatic force then and exactly then when you assume a quantum of gravitation as I predicted. So in his paper, I will have a check later, that is, so he needs a net force somewhere, yeah?
So he,
equation. And it would be interesting what he has derived as a quantum of force there, if he has derived a quantum force at all.
I'll come to the quantum of thing because I also find very similar thing about a quantum thing. But after this, I will briefly, if there is time, we'll talk about that. I think I had showed you that equation before. I'm going to, to you, but the other person.
It made also sense. This is no doubt sense. The people searched for 200 years for relations like that, but didn't found conclusive answers because there were always edge cases where it doesn't fit to quantum mechanics or relativity, so they gave up on that. They shouldn't have given up on that. That's the real thing.
Actually, I'm working with Emery Taylor, who is a, we have come up with the discontinuum physics. And that correlates with the idea of everything is quantized. You said acceleration is quantized, the speed, the time, all these are quantized variables. So that makes sense with the discontinuum, physics, where, it kind of falsifies the continuum mechanics. But
it does.
So
it makes the integration an approximation operation and not the real thing.
That's why iSpace makes sense to me, because iSpace says that you cannot have zero, right? And also, so automatically it kind of implies the quantum aspect.
I mean, if you don't use integrations, then your equations explode quickly, even with Mathematica. So using the integration equation like Gerd is doing, for example, is the proper thing to get answers. It is not wrong to use an integral equation or a differential equation. It's just you should always make yourself aware that this time where Einstein even was seeking for the God formula or whatever, when they tried to get a single equation, all the four forces should fall out of that. That is not possible with integration equations because they are just an approximation. When you have sums in your equations, you will never get the final formula because the final formula will have to be multiplicative, because only when it's multiplicative is it has no rest errors, and energy is not forgiving and charge is even less forgiving. So when there is a golden ratio somewhere, you need to have a balanced way of golden ratios. Which is, by the way, when you see in gravitational equations, often the root over something like the proton mass. And you cannot take the root of a proton mass because the root of a proton is atomic. How to take the root of a proton? I mean, think of that geometric operation. It's just nonsense. You cannot do that. You can do that mathematically, but it makes no sense. It makes much more sense to assume that a proton and an antiproton has been created at historical times, with or without Big Bang, it doesn't matter, symmetrically, because charge and anti-charge needs to be fully balanced always. There is no way around that. And that means these antiprotons are not destroyed. They hide somewhere. They hide somewhere. And what if they would hide in space-subspace combinations like these 3 or 60 subspaces, where every proton is its own antiparticle just in its subspace? Then everything would weigh double the weight we would see on our current weights, because the antiproton had the gravitational effect, but it cannot put on our weight because it's in a different space. Our measurement instruments are 3-dimensional and not 6 or 10-dimensional. Hence, they can only measure what is in the 3 dimension we perceive, and not outside of them.
Oh, yeah. So wouldn't that kind of imply then that there's like as much or more matter in this 6-dimensional realm, and that it's like anti-matter, like, so there could be like antimatter.
Exactly twice as much. But twice as much is, when you think from the theory of dark matter, is still not enough. You have about 6-7% of baryons, and then you have 14% of baryons, but it's still not enough. So that what Christopher is doing is the right way. That Christopher is trying to show that there is superluminous effect for EPR and stuff, but the physics basis for that is a medium. And that medium has self-energy, and a massive self-energy, because it is not static. It's not like plastilene where you can bend it, or something like space, like in Einstein in space, like a plastilene toy. But this is rotating with speed of light. And if you have billions and billions of cells which were rotating with the speed of light, they have a momentum with the speed of light. And that momentum energy is massive. So when you borrow that momentum energy, you stop the rotation of a single cell, and then light is emitted. And then the momentum is carried away by the photon. And when the photon is absorbed, it is retransformed by an atom into rotational energy again. But all of which is happening in the same medium. And I think the current discussions where Manuel is starting to more aggressively discuss on ResearchGate on that questions, you have followed that. That is exactly the right way. So you have baryons which cannot go up to the speed of light. You have light which can only be in Einstein equations the speed of light. And there is nothing wrong with that. You have things above speed of light, because the Einstein equations solve to above speed of light. Just these results are always trashed by the physicists of unphysical things. So you can have things above speed of light, but not slower. You can have things at speed of light, and that is light and nothing else. And hence the word photons.
Well, didn't they always speculate that tachyons existed? You know, so I mean, they do allow, don't they allow for certain superluminal particles in tachyons as a theoretical
I don't
idea?
think it works that way. A tachyon would be a normal particle just allowed to be over the speed of light, because a tachyon was meant as a theoretical construction a long time ago. And this is not what I think. This is vibrational energy of the medium itself. And on top of that vibrations, the transmission rights as a wave without charge. And when there is no charge, so anything which has charge is not allowed to go superluminal. That's simple. But in iSpace theory, you can see that the gravitons, if the theory is meaningful, have no golden ratio in it. They are just consisting of the binary number 1, 1. I mean, it cannot be more simple. And 1, 1 is then a mass, which is minimal, like the graviton should be, but could go superluminal. And I think the gravitons are the actual information carriers of gravity. And when they are the information carriers of gravity, they can be the information carriers of everything, because there is no speed of light barrier. There is a speed of information barrier. You must not exchange information faster than the speed of light, or you get a lot of inconsistencies, and that is forbidden. And even the weirdest quantum information experiments show that there never, in any of their weirdnesses, is a violation of the speed of information. That has just nothing to do with the speed of light. The speed of light is just the most simple example for something which transports information.
Yeah, I mean, but you could possibly set it up, though, that it could violate the speed of information. I mean,
not really, because you can make the speed of light very slow. In a medium, the speed of light can be 2 centimeters per hour or something. Extremely slow light. You can even light in an experiment bring to total halt.
Yeah, but it's not like the interaction between the electric field and the magnetic field in that slowed down light is still happening at the speed of light.
Yes, it does, because the circulation of the subspaces don't rotate slower when you keep the jumps from subspace to subspace at a slower pace. Right. Think of the whole universe is consisting of rotational doors like at Hertie, the big warehouses. Yeah, when you have the big entries where the rotational doors are, and you would have a world consisting only of these rotational doors, and the rotational doors will be made of glass, then anything inside the rotational doors cannot go faster than the rotation of the glass doors. That would be matter, us. But when you have a laser pointer, switch it on, it can go through 100,000s of glass doors, because they don't have to wait until the rotation frequency is leaving them to exit.
Yeah.
It's a simple model, but easy to understand. And in that sense, the gravity is instantaneous. And that is also what the Newtonian equation, I just yesterday read it in the ResearchGate paper. Newtonian mechanics doesn't work if you don't assume that the forces are instantaneous. If you would do that, then the 3-body problem appears and the planetary orbits would not be stable. as even with Newtonian mechanics, the planetary orbits obviously are stable, you have a proof for that, that the force must be instantaneous in a Newtonian theory. That doesn't mean it is instantaneous, but otherwise the theory, you can forget it. And that has nothing to do with relativity, because relativity is just an extension to Newtonian theory. So both would be completely wrong, and hence that proves that gravity is faster than light, is instantaneous. And how does it do that? Well, we don't know. But the speed factor, which you've seen in my presentation, is one of the indications where I think what the speed comes from. Because it was something to the power of 8, and it was not at all clear to me why there would be a power of 8 speed. What should it be good for? And when you calculate it, you see that it all works out well. And the units you can't discuss away.
Oh, so the power of 8 speed is in that case to do with gravity, is it? I thought it was to do with the relationship between iSpace seconds and meters.
Yeah, the translation between the seconds. So when you mean the 47 times 14665, that is a SI to IQ units of translation. But that was in a bracket to the power of 8, and the bracket to the power of 8 had a unit, and that unit was meters per second, and that doesn't go away. You have a speed of whatever kind in whatever unit system to the power of 8. And when I calculate what speed is that in an SI system, you get 10 to the power of 19 meters per second. And that is not accidental. That is not a unit system artifact.
Oh, okay, understood. Yeah, it's interesting that it's 8, because in my work, I'm working with 8 gravitons, which are like the mirror image of the 8 gluons, and sort of have
maybe it has something to do with the particle structures. Maybe it has something to do with the dimensionality. But the power of 8, I would not have naturally expected. I would have expected the power of 3, 6, maybe 4, 10, but not 8.
Interesting. So, I mean, it is kind of in there in the Hilbert field equations, Einstein field equations. You know, 8 pi is in there, and then the other side there's like some other factor.
I think it comes from the Planck force squared. Do you remember my equation from alpha g squared times the Planck force is the force of the quantum of gravitation?
Yeah, you have.
This is where it comes from. So when you have alpha g analyzed geometrically, you see that it is the same geometry than g. It's GoldenRatio to the power of 6 times pi to the power of 10. And that means that alpha g is implicitly g one way or another. And as alpha g is defined as the electron mass squared over the Planck mass squared, you can equally define alpha to be, so the fine structure constant, to be just the electron charge squared over, the electron mass squared over the Planck mass squared, and this is the electron charge squared over the Planck charge squared. Yes, so this is the correct definition. Okay.
So you were saying that everything kind of comes out of nothing, but yeah, I'm going to push back on that, because it didn't look like nothing to me. It looks like, you know, there's a lot of different numbers in there. You've got the golden ratio. So why do you call it nothing? Is it because it's so simple, or?
Yeah, because it's simple.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
It is simple from my point of view. That's why I asked. It's not really simple, but I haven't given you the derivation of that factor, of course, because the paper I wrote in 2018 in one night, and it fell out from another equation, and that other equations in the other paper might be 1,000 pages of Mathematica, but that is not the point. The point is that it contains only simplest form of geometry, 6961, electron mass in integer form, and that is stunning, the SI value 299792458. Why would it? I have more and more suspicion that this value is physical and not just a human artifact.
Right. The other question I was going to ask on that equation was, I recall previously you stated that everything, I think this is what you said, I'm trying to remember, everything is squared, and that is scary. Is that what you said, yeah?
Yeah.
I noticed that in that equation, everything is squared. So why do you think that is scary, though? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, because it is showing that it might be the true geometry. This is not an artifact. This is not accidental. This is much too complex from a Lego building. Think of, you see an Eiffel Tower from the distance, and you say, wow, cool. nice tower, 300 meters high, was a good engineer. You think yourself, you have never seen it before. And then you go close to the Eiffel Tower, and then you recognize that all parts of these 300-meter high Eiffel Towers are Lego pieces. Wouldn't you think?
You'd be like, whoa.
Yeah, you would expect some steel construction, but you suddenly see Lego when you're very close.
Okay, yes. You'd be like, yeah, very
and that
highly
would
impressive.
stun you completely. It's like, why isn't that steel? Why is that Lego? It cannot be Lego, or it should not be Lego. But the mathematics of the exponents prove that it is Lego, because we have very, very small numbers and geometrical things and get very, very big things, like the 6961 to the power of 19. That is never accidental.
Yeah, the speed of gravity as well. So, oh yeah, another question I had was just about going back to iSpace units, because I'm still trying to grasp that fully. So the one thing I was thinking, if one in iSpace units, is that, you know, and then you have like pi 3. So is pi divided by 3, is one equivalent to pi divided by 3 in like SI units or just normal geometry, arithmetic?
Not sure I understand you. So the Euclidian-Pi is 3.14 something, as you know it from school books, yeah?
Yeah.
And the pi 3 is the Euclidean replacement pi in iSpace geometry, because you only have pixels, and the pixels are 6 around 1. And if you have a 6 around 1 geometry, your pi naturally comes to 3. They are wave number-wise compatible to each other, but not numerically. So when you have a standing wave in iSpace with 6 nodes, you have an energy of 3. 3 entities up and down is the smallest entity you can have. So the energy is 3 of your base energies of the wave number from a lambda point of view. When you calculate the exact same with the Euclidian-Pi, you also have 6 waves, 6 ups and down. You also have a base energy of 3 up and down waves, but your wave is a sine wave then, or a cosine wave, and is fully analog and not discrete. But the energy doesn't change by that.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think what I'm trying to get at is, you know, when you define pi is 3, then in the computer, is it, okay, now, is it effectively setting that value so that all the arithmetic is, you know, like the way you'd said, we work in base 10.
All circles, all iSpace circles have intrinsically that pi 3 geometry if it is a pi 3 iSpace.
Okay.
If you
then
if you look on a wall, then you have bricks, and these bricks are stapled half on it. You have a row of bricks and a half shifted row of bricks, and again a half shifted row of bricks. So this is how you make walls. But when you look at the brick as the center of your circle, then you have 6 bricks around 1 brick. But in change distance definition, this is a full valid circle. That is not some approximation of a circle. That is a circle.
Well, I think what I'm asking is just like internally in the program that you're running, or the mechanics of the program that you're running. Let's say pi is 3. Okay, that's fine. It's an integer value. And then you have Euclidian-Pi, which is 3.1416, etc. So I'm wondering, to make them like equivalent, like you could divide the iSpace pi by 3, you'll get 1. Okay.
No, you get not 1. You get 0.47. You get exactly the difference ratio between the experimental result of the electronic muon magnetic moment and the muon magnetic moment. The electromagnetic moment and the muon magnetic moment have a ratio, and that is 0.4. It's 4.7%. Is 1.04. And the geometrical reason is pi over pi 3, because that is the value.
Okay, so that's very in-depth. Maybe what I'm like just going for a simpler thing here. So like when you're saying you're dividing by 1, you're not dividing by an iSpace 1, you're dividing by you. No, that doesn't make sense.
How can you divide by 1? You don't do anything if you do that. What I'm saying is, when something rotates, whatever it is, you get an Euclidian-Pi. Always, of course, at the border.
Oh, sorry, divided by 3. Sorry. Yeah. So you take the
when you divide by 3 in iSpace, you just do the same as if you divide by pi in a continuum. This is the equivalent operation.
Yeah. So the question I'm asking is, you divide it by 3, you get 1 in iSpace units. if you do the same, so is that the same as like, if I was to take pi then divided by 3, I would get some value. And you're saying that 1 in iSpace units is equivalent to that value, pi divided by 3.
Yeah, when your unit radius is 1, then your Euclidean radius is 2 times 3 times pi. Sorry, 2 times pi Euclidean times 1, because it's the circumference of your Euclidean circle. And the circumference of an iSpace circle is 6. This is discrete.
Okay, okay.
This is just geometry.
Yeah, no, I was just making sure, because that clarity would help me maybe understand a bit better. So, but that's cool. Oh yeah, so another question I had, I think this is the final question, is the reason why the gravity force and the electromagnetic force is the same? Because you've stated that before, haven't you? That they're the same strength, ultimately. Is the same reason? Is that the same reason the units don't matter when quantized? So like a foot and a meter becoming very small, it all equals 1.
Yeah, I understand your question. That is partly correct. Partly it is due to the definition of the unit system, but mainly, and that is interesting, it is because of the definition of the kilogram.
Okay.
The kilogram is defined to contain a charge which is hidden. When you have electron volt, you divide implicitly that charge out, because an electron volt is nothing less than a kilo. So electron volt per c squared means you have an energy in electron volt instead of volt, and there is no further unit assigned. But this is not assigned because the people leave it away from the equations. They are lazy in writing. An electron volt does not exist. What does exist is electron volt over c squared, and c squared has the unit meters per second squared. And when you put the electron volt properly, then you have volt ampere second is joule, or electron ampere second is electron joule. But this means there is a golden ratio in the kilogram, if you want it or not, because the definition of an electron volt is to divide by the charge. So when you go the reverse way, then you have a chargeless electron volt and become a kilogram by multiplying with the charge. Now that is an evil mistake by design, because when you do that, you mix charge and mass. You mix charge and mass, and that is strictly forbidden. So the kilogram is mixing charge and mass by its definition. And there's no way out. And that is why everything seems so big, because the factor of 1.61 of golden ratio is not a little factor. This is a big thing multiplying directly into your equations. And when you have a large mass charged body, do you know how many charges are multiplied in there? Oh, here you go. And there's where the 10 to the power of 42 factor comes from. Mathematically, it's a simple equation. It is the ratio of the speed of light in space divided by the squared, divided by the ratio of the speed of light in iSpace squared, multiplied with the iSpace spacetime in space, divided by the iSpace spacetime in iSpace. That is technically the equation. And that gives 10 to the power of 42 equally. But would you define a unit system where the speed of light is 1? And would you define a time where this time is exactly 1 over 6961 minus multiplied with the compensation factor, so also 1, then you can show in such unit system the forces of gravity and electromagnetics are completely equal, 100% identical. And that shouldn't be, because it should be in any unit system always the gravity much weaker. The gravity is not weak because the speed of light's numerical definition 299792458 is so big. I mean, think it. Golden ratio over 6961 is the definition of the speed of light in iSpace. There is no large number with a lot of digits, but it does exactly the same. So you have a unit system scaling, which is a relative perception. This is just due to the numerics of your numbers. But that does not go away when you make ratios of time and speed of light that compensates out. And with the compensated correction factor, these strengths are completely equal. And that it makes exactly what the paper of Rajan has shown before. That is the reason, because gravity and electromagnetics are the same thing. They are not two different forces. There is no gravity. There is only electromagnetic force.
Right. Okay. So when you're talking about the quantized gravity, is that are they photons? Are they electrons or something?
Yeah, they cannot say that. So yes and no. So would they be electrons? They would not be able to go superluminal, and they could not transmit gravity instantaneous. So they are certainly not charged. So they are particles which are not charged, and the only particles not charged we know of, except of dark matter, magic, and things. I don't believe in that dark matter. Dark matter is a calculational thing, not a physical thing.
Yeah. What are the only other ones that we know of? Or is dark matter? Is that it? It's the only ones we know.
The dark matter is a multiplicative factor. Otherwise, all our theories are wrong. But these are not my theories, so I don't care if they are wrong or not. Dark matter is a fiction.
Right. So what is the other option then? Is there another particle?
Yeah, there is no question. As electromagnetic force and gravitational force is identical, we should assume that it is the same force. And the Newtonian equation form, if you have charge 1 times charge 2 over radius squared, or if you have mass 1 times mass 2 over radius squared, there's no difference, because the charge and the mass are the same thing when you handle it properly. The charge is always golden ratio in iSpace, and the mass is always 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, or whatever, a number of integers, a 1 sequence in mass. So when you normalize your mass ones to golden ratio, you only have numerically things which are valued of golden ratio, and then you can mix them up because they are not different anymore. The universe is chosen to choose golden ratio for a geometric reason. When you make a Penrose parquet, if you know what that is, and tile the plane with that, then you get coordinates which don't repeat each other until infinity. So it's not a grid. It is looking like a grid, but there is not a single grid position which will ever repeat, and that is mathematically proven by Penrose. Which means that if you match a square grid or a hexagonal grid over a Penrose tile grid, you don't get ever a hit match of these coordinates. And if you don't match a hit coordinate, then a Lego tries to go into, I don't want to be here, no allowed, next position, I want to be here, not allowed, next position. So the Lego piece will fly over the Lego grid and never lock in. And when it is a charged one, it is locking in. It would need to be moving in positions of multiples of golden ratio and not multiples of 1, which normal matter is doing. And that's why charge and mass are totally different. They have a geometry which is incompatible to each other. They don't see each other in a way. And this is why the reason why superluminous stuff is possible. Because when you have a surface wave, it would be blocked by a friction. But there is no friction because it can never arrest to the positions of the grid. It's flying over the grid.
Could you invert it, like have matter as the Penrose tiling and the superluminal particles as the grid system?
Can you repeat? I'm not sure if I understood.
Well, you're suggesting that the charged particles are locking into a grid system, whereas the superluminal gravity force particle is running along a Penrose tiling type thing that doesn't.
Exactly.
So I'm asking, can you invert the two systems where you'd have, you know, the massless graviton particle?
What do you mean with invert? When you say invert, what is it geometrically?
I mean, just switch them. Just switch the two systems. So the particles now that was formerly on the grid systems are now on the.
So you mean that the mass would be golden ratio and the charge would be 1?
I guess, yeah, something along those lines.
Mathematically, that would be possible with correction factors, of course. But the correction factors would always involve the square of golden ratio one way or another. And that would bring you back to the old grid positions. So the answer should be no, it's not possible to invert it.
Okay, cool. Thanks. It's interesting. Oh yeah, so who's this Christopher person you mentioned? I should have led with this question. Christopher who? Who's the other person? Oh, the guy who's working in superluminal stuff. You mentioned.
Oh, Christopher.
Yeah, what's his surname? Like, where is he? Is he on ResearchGate or is he?
Yeah, of course. Did I miss the point?
Yeah, what's his surname? What's his second name? His Christian name? Christopher who?
Maybe I mismatched the surname.
Oh,
I'm not I'm not good in this naming stuff, so I thought it's Christopher, but you are Christopher, so I mismatched you. Sorry for that. Yeah, of course.
Yes, I'm Christopher as well. Who's okay? So there's another Christopher. Who is
not in our system? So I'm just stuck up. So give me a second. Emmanuel, I meant. Sorry, not Christopher, of course.
Yeah. Oh, I understand. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Now we're here. So yeah. It was just a logical flip of your names in the head. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I was thinking that might have been the case because I didn't hear this history before. So that's cool. So that was interesting. Yeah, good paper as well, Rajan, on the Coulomb thing. That was impressive. Yeah. But I was a bit confused though about one thing. You mentioned John figuring out the discrepancy between the North and the South Pole. Yeah, I remember John saying that multiple times. But then I was thinking, but how did he do that? Was that mathematical as well, or did he? He didn't do that.
No, he did an experiment, right? He did some experiments.
Yeah,
and he had some experiments he has put up in ResearchGate, various experiments with the magnets, and in that one he's showing, in one of the experiments he's showing the North and South poles are not the same. There's asymmetry, which means the one has more power than the other. The South Pole, I think, he has more power than the North Pole.
Was that confirmed by Emmanuel? Because John asked Emmanuel to redo the experiment, and I think
he said, I think double slit. Yeah, he wants some of the experiments he has done. Somebody else does that. It's always good, right? To get
to understand me right, I think that John's experiments with the double slit are very interesting. With the nail in the slit and the glass slits and these kind of things should be investigated, because I think there is something to that. Maybe I do it myself when I have more time, and then I need really a month of time to maybe I take an intern or a sabbatical or something, and I can do that. But the magnets which he uses, which he shows in his presentations, where multiple kitchen fridge magnets are positioned sideways partially, and so in a geometric form, I cannot buy into that, because a kitchen fridge magnet is in its own not a quantum. It is a good model if you want it that way, but quantized models wouldn't flip-wise attach horizontally. I'm not even sure if I buy into the logic of monopoles yet.
Right.
So nobody has shown or proven to me that a monopole actually exists or is necessary to do something.
Well, I think Manuel's work talks about it, but it's like inside the system of the electron.
Yeah, I've thought a long way when you have a surface which is positive charge versus the negative charge inside the surface. Yeah, but how do you do that? Field lines of magnets don't do that. A field line of a magnet finds a way out. Yeah, it finds a fractal way out even.
Well, I mean, I think he's just talking about the geometry of the monopoles, which are like a kind of a vortex.
There's a thing between electromagnetic stuff and purely electrostatic stuff. Don't mismatch that now. When you have a bowl with electrostatics on it, you pour electron from a rubbed cat on top of the surface, and your electrometer swings off as an experiment and says, we have now more electrons on the surface of that bowl. And hence the electrometer, which is also filled with electron, repels from purely Newtonian force and swings away.
Well, I think the point just to clarify Emmanuel's point, he's saying that the reason why we can't find the monopoles is because they actually become dipoles in the electron. You know, because with for example, Dirac's, I think, or was it Dirac or it might have been another guy, Pauli, perhaps. I think it was Dirac. He had the monopoles, but it's like it's kind of like two vortices that are rotating the same way, but they're connected by a plasma or string, some sort of what do you call it? Anyway, energy string. But if you were to take those two and rotate them like this, then you have Emmanuel's model. again, you know,
Mm-hmm,
and stick them together. So that's what he was talking about. Just so I make that.
Yeah, I think that monopoles does not exist in the real world, but in superluminous phase, the monopoles could exist. The
Right.
superluminous.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
if you could like split that model that he had up maybe and stretch it out, is that what you mean?
Yeah, actually, when it becomes, see, finally, I'm coming to the following conclusion. Like, it seems that there is a superluminous plenum. That's the general thing everywhere. But the local, you know, what happens, the distortion of the field occurs. And the distortion, see, you have the fundamentals of disorder, order, entropy, energy, right? But what happens, the distorted field gives enough energy. Okay, it's already the superluminous plenum is already turbulent, right? So I cannot say it's order. There is order there, but what happens is localizes the thing. So locally you have extra energy. That extra energy converts to like Horde, like what John is saying, and it can create that Horde PDP circuit, that circuit that I'm talking about, that mechanism. So it creates a mechanism like a vortex, you know, like if you are Atlantic. Think of Atlantic Ocean. Atlantic Ocean is very turbulent, right? But inside that somewhere you can get vortex or eddy currents or vortex, right?
So I think I understand what you mean, but from a charge point of view, the charge parity is not negotiable. So when you have a right rotating vortex in the turbulence, you need, with whatever physical mechanism, a left rotating somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because the angular momentum needs to be zero in the end.
Yes. That's exactly right. So what happens is one vortex is, let's say, clockwise, right? So there will be another vortex somewhere anti-clockwise.
So when that vortexes would be distributed with superluminal stuff very far away, then they would still charge-wise exist, but would be monopoles from your logic because they are out of the information distance of the normal speed of light.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, that is an interesting thought. That is a very interesting thought. Yeah. So the superluminosity would make the monopoles not monopoles, but logical monopoles because they can never reach their counterpart again.
Yes. So they are separated, but when you have these mechanism going on, at some point they can, you know, statistically they can come together. They're random, but statistically they will, because they are opposite thing, they will try to come together. You know, it's like chiral forces. Like, so they come together and then it forms like what Emmanuel is saying, like a horn torus type of thing that Christopher is also explaining. And that forms a dipole automatically, you know.
I mean,
and
maybe
when it forms,
has a lot to do with fluid dynamics. The equations of fluid dynamics are very similar to that of quantum mechanics, and I know just that from the library of Mathematica equations. I sometimes browse through the Mathematica library and let me inspire or help or instruct, call it whatever you want it, by the examples in the online help library of Mathematica. And there are very, very interesting fluid dynamic examples. And think you put a rod into a jelly and you pull the rod in the jelly, then you get two vortices, one rotating left, one rotating right, where you pull the rod through. And that appears naturally. So when you have a physical mechanical distortion in a physical substance of viscosity n, whatever is n, then you get, if n is not ultra strict like a jelly marmalade or something, then you get a rotation to the right and the left automatically, with not anything inducing it specially.
I think that's physics. That's physics, I think. Physics of fluid mechanics, like you said.
Yeah.
The fluid mechanics.
So the whole of that, what we perceive to call plenum or ether or whatever, is actually a superfluid.
Superfluid, yeah. It's essentially like superfluid. You can say that. So what happens is that so then it stabilizes, right? It stabilizes dipole. Then it forms a particle eventually. So that's the formation of
as a standing wave. So when it's frictionless and the energy is just right, then it will be a multiple of integers and keeping a stable wave, and around the turbulence would be shielded. Yes. The turbulence would be around that system like a cell in the ocean would form a supercell and then became a biological cell, and in the end, us humans. It needs to protect itself from the outer surroundings to be stable.
So that's why you are working with Emmanuel multi-phase, which means that from the superluminar phase, you have another phase that's forming, you know, this real phase that eventually forms the particle and everything. So you have always the superluminar thing, but you have the three things. That also I put it in one paper, that you have superluminar phase, then you have vacuum phase where stabilizes the speed of light. The speed of light is constant, that keeps it. So the light forms, and in the real matter, it is always less than the speed of light. So you have the Einstein equation where you have the limiting speed of light. So that the question is how the information goes from the subluminar to the luminar to the superluminar thing. How does the information? I don't think it form, you know, the information doesn't, it may be discontinuous. I mean,
fiber, you know, those hop fiber vibrations, something like that. But I mean,
that's why I think,
Also,
so I want to
minimum amount of mechanics to transport a single bit. When you have light, a quanta could be up polarized or down polarized, but I have seen also experiments where a single quanta can be up and down polarized and at the same time circular polarized. So if you have such a quanta, it would transmit 2 bits at the same time, or 4 states, not just one. And there may be even more tricks experimental-wise to put more states on a photon. So these states are like stickers on an object. They are not intrinsic to the element moving. This is what I believe. You modify with your experiment the photon to get a sticker, and that sticker means something for you, and that meaning is transported with the photon with the speed of light. But what would be the native universe transmission mechanism in something like a plenum? I mean, think of it. When Hoyle at the time made the steady state theory, it was laughed at. But wouldn't a plenum bring exactly such a steady state situation, a non-Big Bang creation, eternal universe, everything is plenum, everywhere infinity, and inside are structures, and these structures are just distortions. And when they are complex enough, well, we can discuss about them because we become humans. And after 5 million years, we have enough computer stuff and knowledge of math to do the discussion. But is it really that simple?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, isn't there the issue of like the whole universe winding down because of entropy? So it's, you know, then when you discuss like an eternal universe, it seems like an odd universe, especially like if they're right about expansion and cooling. Obviously, you can have an expansion, right?
There's another one called condensate theory. So suppose the superluminous thing is like a condensate, right? So like a super condensate. Then this local thing produces, you know, like a evaporation from that condensation, and in that evaporation it stabilizes. Then so you can think of the superluminous thing as the base, and then you have these, you know, the vacuum thing which stabilizes speed of light, and then you have the you have the subluminar thing above that, which constantly evaporates into that phase, and then it forms all the real matter universe and everything, that visible universe, and then eventually it can come back to the condensate, right? So it forms like a loop, and this loop then, so it's like a source sink mechanism.
Yeah, right. Everything is like created and destroyed continuously, kind of in a loop.
So it kind of continuously goes there, stabilizes. That's the visible universe that we are in. But again, it again condenses back into that superluminous thing. So it eternally keeps. So it can do it different, you know, all over the universe. It doesn't have to be one space, right? Distributed. So it's like a random distribution. So you are statistically everywhere, and then so it creates.
Yeah. So within that. So you're saying that when we look into space, we are seeing this process happen in real time.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, very similar to what happens at sea. What we can see in the visible universe, because we interpret what we see, we project that as, even Newton, everybody did that, even Galileo. What we see in the real thing, that makes sense. The physics, we extend that and see the connections, and we generalize that, right? So the same way, like the sea evaporates water, the water goes up, and then it condenses back as rain comes back and goes back. That's a condensate theory, is very similar to that, right? So
Rajan, when you say there is phase changing going on with that, shouldn't then the superluminosity, not at one way or another, we just have no clue yet, be measurable?
it's not measurable. As far as we know, superluminous thing we cannot measure, so it is just
but why not? When things condensate and come back, then there should be transition points, and when we find the geometry or mechanics of these transition points,
we may be able to find
measurable.
Indirectly, like black hole, indirectly we can infer, like black hole we are inferring. Like black hole you cannot see directly, but with very clever spectroscopy we are able to interpret that as black hole. So in the same way, probably from that you can find out a new type of filter where you can actually say, okay, when it comes back you find the interface or where it contacts, and then by measuring that interface we can say, okay, this side is the superluminous thing, the other one is the subluminar thing, and things like that. So we can find the phases, the phase shifts or phase transitions.
So this is John's sources and sinks, essentially.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay.
So I have put something there which I showed last time. Christopher was there, but you people. So can you put that, Christopher? Because I have put it in there.
What was this picture? Yeah, I saw that. I was wondering if you wanted to share that or not.
Yeah, I just want to briefly talk about that because I thought it was.
I had no time to look at the video of you yet, Christopher.
Yeah,
I will watch that later, but I had no time yet.
Oh, great! Yeah, thanks. Let me know what you think.
In that, in the other one, I'm showing that. You can see now, right? Okay.
Yeah, we can see that. That's
you can see what I.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is that what I'm thinking is that you can think of light as blank sheets. Okay. I will have some description later on. I want all of us to be co-authors, but I will start writing, and I want to do some small papers, and then we can all. This is supposed to be like that. So I want eventually like this one, a paper like this, information paradigm, shifting cotton. So right now the co-authors, whoever is interested, you can join. But what I finally found is that you can think of light as blank sheets, sheets of blanks going up. So this is light. Then the sound, light or photons, that as blank sheet. Then the sound or vibration sound as vortex loops. Okay, so these vortex loops occur everywhere. So this is the fundamental level at the quantum level or subquantum level. And what happens is these can interact together. The light and the speed can come together, or they can separate. So this is what, actually if I put from the Emmanuel, what I have done, the fundamental matrix is that you can have a field, a gradient field and a vortex field, right? So when I adjust this one to the slope of that as a gradient and this thing, so the light will appear like that, and the sound will appear that. And I call it light and sound. Excuse me, I meant light like or sound like. So eventually we have to convert it into a blank sheet or vortex loops. So that's a general description. So this field, which is called, I call it gradient field, which is essentially the light thing, and the vortex field, which is a sound. They can come together and form something like a unified field. So that's what is happening, I think. What is happening is subluminar, it doesn't exist as light or sound, or what we call as the photon and vibration. They are a combined field, but they get separated by the distorted field. The distorted field give enough energy to separate them like this. They separate them into gradient field and vortex field, and that forms eventually the light and the sound. So in the superluminal thing, there is no light and sound, so that's why we cannot see it. We can never see it. But in the vacuum level, it stabilizes the speed of light, so it starts forming the Planck sheets of light. And then when it goes up, so your superluminal thing is way down here, and then you have somewhere the vacuum here somewhere, and then above the subluminal thing you have the sound or the vortex loops coming, and that forms the real matter universe. So that's the essential thing. So
right. And you were saying that in space there's no sound, I think you were saying, but light, or just light. But then
exactly
in a black hole there's no light, just sound.
Yes. So they convert. What happens is that, so that's what's happening, the double slit, when we put object. What happens is that we discussed, Christopher, last time. So what happens, the light goes there, hit an object, right? In that case, it converts to heat, right? So the heat converts, but it continues to the other side. So the light doesn't stop, but it continues as some other wave. In this case, the real world is heat, but the superluminal thing, everything is that combined torsion field, I would call it. So I want to show a very simple. That has to do with group velocity and phase velocity. That's what I'm thinking about now. The tachyon thing and everything. Let me find. Okay. So suppose. So this is the Planck sheet, right? Yeah. This is the Planck sheet.
Yeah.
This is the Planck sheet. This is the Planck sheet. So let me. I'm just trying to compare this with the experiment. I mean, and a very simple experiment I want to show. But I think it kind of gives an idea of what I'm talking about. So you have the Planck sheet here, right? So the Planck sheets are like sheet of paper like that. And let's say the vortex loop is like my pen here rotating, right? So this one is coming up like that, right?
I can't see that.
Now can you see?
You're kind of frozen. But yeah, I can see now a little bit. You're very
I
small.
can share in the other screen also. Okay, I will put it in the other camera. Maybe you can see that. Let me see whether that.
Well, I think it's because you're sharing your screen. Your actual camera size is very small on our screen.
Let me put in the other camera whether it makes more sense.
No, it'll still be the same. Okay, yeah, give it a go. Yeah.
So now can you see the? So you have this.
And
you have this paper which is like a Planck sheet, and my pen is like the vortex loop, right?
Yeah.
You can see that now, right? So the vortex loop is moving like that. The Planck sheet is going up and down, right? So what happens is they can curl together. So so the unified field is, everything is kind of curled together, and my vortex loop is inside. You see that the vortex loop is inside.
Yeah,
it's like that, right?
Right.
So now I have individual velocity or the phase velocity. So this can move at certain speed. This can move at the speed of light, let's say, okay, the normal sheet. But when I put them together in the normal medium, what happens is, this is the group velocity, right? This is the group velocity.
Right.
The group velocity generally tend to be at least less than the fastest speed. So it will be less than the speed of light, but it may be even less than the speed of sound sometimes, depending on the viscosity of the medium, right?
Sure.
So this is what is happening in a normal medium. But in an anomalous medium, the group velocity can be faster than the individual velocity. This is like the literature also. So
you're saying.
So the superluminous thing is essentially an anomalous medium.
Stop. If the group velocity is different from the phase velocity, you have there will be Verzerrung, distortions of the signal.
Yes. Yes.
But this is the reason why you can't transmit information with group velocities. You can only transmit information when the wave has actually reached the receiver, not when the extensions of the group part can be extended to infinity even, and it cannot transmit any information. It is fictive as a wave.
Yeah, but the information is distorted or destroyed, may be destroyed.
I would say encoded is not destroyed. It's just stretched in a way that you cannot identify it anymore, or the level or the amplitude is so small that you cannot measure it anymore.
But you see only any signal, but what is with normal light?
So I think what is happening is that what I'm saying, maybe it probably will start making sense, because so the light and the sound, they can exist together as unified field, or they can be separated. So the information is transmitted. So as the information is transmitted, initially maybe light, okay? Then it combines with the sound and forms this unified field, what I call unified field. And they go as unified field, as a group, and you cannot see it.
And there is group and phase velocity is the same with this field.
That's something we have to calculate. So that's why we want to work together, because I have the idea, but actual calculation, like Gerd, you have done a lot of detailed calculation. Maybe you can do that. I want to do the detailed, even Christian with iSpace, you have facility to calculate. So I want to calculate this, and also I think there is a question of refractive index also coming into the picture, because the anomalous medium, my conjecture is that anomalous medium, the refractive index is either less than 1, like glass and things like that, less than 1, or even like dark matter, what they call dark matter, less than 0, even negative refractive index. So we can actually calculate these and what happens to the sound and the light. So then we calculate the group velocity of the light and sound, the phase velocity and individual velocity, and we compare them, and we have like a graph. We can see what is happening, and then maybe we can, then the graph, we can get the actual values and say, okay, this region is the superluminous thing. And we can say, okay, that's because the refractive index is, either less than 1 or less than 0. Then you have equal to 1 or greater than 1, and the normal medium has a refractive index greater than 0 or even greater than 1. So like that. So if you can find that, I think we have proved our thing in a way. And that's one of the first proofs I think we can do that superluminous thing exists. And then together with Christopher, what he has mentioned very nicely, that Emmanuel also agrees, that why people didn't calculate about the geometry, the Riemann geometry, from the geometrical argument, that actually when you calculate from the geometry of the of the plane thing, that when it goes there, the space actually spread out, it's infinite. So the velocity, when you try to calculate the velocity, is almost infinite space. So you have luminous thing. So it depends on how we look at it. And another one I want to point out before I forget is that the power 8 that Christopher is talking about, Christian is talking about, I think has to do with 3 dimensions. So c square is actually the area. See, c is the length, right? But c square is actually the area, like I'm saying, the area of the sheet, things like that. And then c to the power 8 is because 3 dimensions. This area, this occurs in 3 dimensions. You have c square cubed, power 3, because XYZ axis. So then you can get C to the power 8. So when you talk about the 3-dimensional thing, with all the area, with the volume, you automatically should get C to the power 8. So people are only the linear distance, but I think we have to calculate the actual.
This is an argument from string theory, basically. When string theory say we have these branes, and the branes have some wiggling instead of strings which have just some one-dimensional structure, then geometrically, naturally, by the exponents, you're right. Yeah, then with something 3-dimensional. But what is with time then? Is time then a dimension or not? Is time, when it's discrete, is still
that's the thing.
One way or another? I think time is something very special.
That's another thing.
Space-time is does it doesn't happen.
Christian, you go ahead first there and keep your thought, Raja. What were you saying, Christian?
Yeah.
So space-time is like Einsteinian. Space-time is 4-dimensional, but I think time is so radically different from the rest, especially now that I see that it's quantized in 1/6961 units, that we shouldn't talk about space-time. It's just n-dimensional space, or typically 3 plus subspace dimension if needed for the plenum or whatever, but the time is a discrete tick-tock and is really like in a computer more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to simplify things as well.
So why then in all theories it's a dimension? I don't think it's a dimension. It is nothing like a dimension.
I suppose you could use it like, think of it that way, but as a way to make your
mathematically you can do that, but it makes not physical sense. This is what I'm saying. The theory of relativity has a good deal with 14-digit precision handling these kind of things, but they have also a very complicated mathematics, and I think it is overly complicated because the model is overly complicated. It's not wrong, it's just an overly complicated method of calculating a simple thing.
Right. Well, I mean, sometimes they just have space, as a flat plane, and then time going up in the z-axis, and then you have things moving along that kind of rotate then, and then you have the length contractions and time, so that's kind of, not simple enough concept anyway, at least. But,
agree.
Probably more to be said. I mean, you could there's obviously a lot.
But these exceptional things where x-axis in flight direction gets shorter by theory of special or common relativity doesn't justify to give it the status of a full space direction. And it never was one in the root. It is a subtractive component, but this is not the primary problem. The primary problem is that most people overlook that the time component in the relativity is multiplied with c squared after that minus, whereas the space directions are not, which already shows that it is something completely different.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't disagree anyway. So Rajan, continue there. You also had a point you wanted to make.
Yeah. So essentially, as you say that you will see in my papers, right? And then I talked to Christopher and you earlier a little bit that I believe the time actually you need a 4-vector time matrix to different, what we see as I'll call it arithmetic time. Actually, you are following like 11, close to be 11:30 here, but I call it arithmetic time. But actual time is actually a 4-vector matrix. So you have this proper time. You have the so this is called the timeline. I call what we follow, like in Earth, for example, it's like a timeline. So you have proper time, and you have also time that is real time. So you have proper time, real time. Then you have a global time, which is global and also what I call
okay, so there's your 4-vector, but is that a 4-vector technically? I mean, it's a 2x2 matrix. So I thought a 4-vector.
Yeah, it's a 2x2 matrix, which eventually becomes like a 4-vector. Because it is all vector. It's all vectors. The time is a vector in this one.
How do you turn it? This was the question I had earlier. How do you turn the 2x2 into matrix into a 4 vector.
Or the other way around, right? So this is
Or the
one
other
of
way
them.
around, yeah. I suppose
Yeah,
you could multiply the 2 vectors, could you? The transpose of one, and then you get a 4 by 4 matrix, and then contract that using either complex numbers or something. Or
can you see what I don't know whether you can see now.
You need to stop sharing your screen, and we can see it a lot better. Is that possible? I can do that actually. Hang on a sec. There. Sorry, it was my fault.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I didn't realize that you had. I forgot you didn't have control over the screen sharing.
Yeah, it's okay. So I don't know whether you can. Let me pull up. Oops.
Your camera is off at the moment.
Oh, my camera went off somehow. Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. The light is. Okay. I don't know how well you can see this. Can you see what I'm? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have this. Yeah, the 4, right? This is the 4 element matrix. You multiply by. So there are 2 ways. This is one way. Multiply by a x and y to matrix. You can convert into 2 matrix. So this becomes a 2 vector matrix. So you have the 4.
Oh yeah, matrix. But that's technically not a 4. Is that a 4? Is that what you mean by a 4 vector? Then it's a matrix.
Yeah, actually, suppose these are vectors.
Each one is a vector.
Yeah.
So it's not a scalar then. They're all.
It's not vectors. A scalar. Yeah. The time in this case, not a scalar. It's actually a vector. So that's what I'm representing. So now I convert this to time, right? The time. So you have time t1, which is actually a tensor. T2. It could be we can consider as a second order tensor, which is almost like a vector, first order tensor, which is like a vector. So you have these 4, right? And you convert it. And what I'm saying is that you can use something called on-off switch. So that eventually I want to convert to what Gerd is saying, or especially Christian is saying about iSpace.
Yeah.
You can actually show these are quantized. This become quantum 1 and 2 quantum time. So it is a global, local, global, and a global quantum. So 2 matrix. What I'm saying here is that not all the time. See, the good thing is that not all the time everything is on. For example, something may be on locally and maybe off in the world line, in the timeline, or the local our time may be on, but may be off in the astronomical thing, and vice versa. So in any of them, something can be on sometimes, something can be off. So they eventually produce the quantum things.
Right.
So what quantum says is that not always something is like quantum is that it waits for something to come, like quantum of information. I don't get the information until I wait for a while, right? So it is on for a while, but then it's off for the next time. So the quantum transmits that it waits for something to happen, like a mechanism, like a hot PDP mechanism. It's happening. So it waits there, and then it has to wait for a while enough. And then when once it finishes that job, or once finishes that particular circuit, then it comes on. So the switch is off. So it's like a circuit. So circuit, something is happening in the circuit, and then the circuit is off at that time. It's happening like, a brain, like when we sleep, things like that, things are off. Then we wake up, it comes on. Even in our sleep, we can see dreams and things like that. But there is a quantum. The information doesn't come continuously. It's like a quantum. So it could be also because there's a transmission. There's also
this is in fact the discontinuum argument with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Memory.
So yeah.
Every
Taylor, yeah.
So
it's kind of the time version of the space discontinuum.
Yes. So what is happening right now? We have a lot of things that we are still agree on, because when I sent to him, he says that okay, that falsifies with that thing. So he's a very good person who argues the things. He doesn't take anything. But now he's agreed. One of the things that we agreed is about the distortion field. About the particle is actually a distorted field. We called it discontinuum energy field. So he himself sent one. So I want to reply to him. Yeah, that coincides with what we are thinking. So I think slowly we are coming to the same, what you call same page, so to say, of arguments.
Yeah, I understand. For a long time, Rajan, I was very confused by what you're talking about. And I looked into Raman spectroscopy. You know what I'm talking about? Spectroscopy. Thank you. Yeah. So I looked into that. Yeah, I'm getting much more clear on what you're talking about. It's very interesting. So it's cool. I like it. I was just thinking about similar ideas at the moment. So, but I think they're a bit too new to like just spout in front of everyone, because I just maybe I should take time to vet them. Essentially, they seem pretty cool, and they could be very much in line with your work to do the discontinuum arguments.
Yeah, I think if we are coming together,
like how big is that area of discontinuum? I think you calculated that as 400 meters or something, was it?
Yeah, I found that. 500 meters. Yeah, close enough.
500 meters. So I want to see if the calculation I make on this other theory.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. That's how we can figure out. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna split, guys, but you guys are more than welcome to stay on.
To check my wounds, it's time for plaster change. So I have to up as well.
It's like 3 hours in. So.
It was very interesting. Thank you very much for the chance of showing this very old iSpace calculation to some useful modern approach. Now knowing what the 6961 really means and exclusively means, and seeing that in the result equation of the ratio as singular value to the power of 10 really surprised myself. Normally you get a complex ratio from one thing to another, but the ratios of the IQ to the SI formulated, don't know the equation number anymore, you have to check yourself when you go down, became a singular value, 6961 to the power of 10, and that is really an amazing result.
Yeah, and the quantumness of everything, time, length.
What Rajan rightly said, when I think of it, he's completely right, because information comes discrete. There is no continuous way of receiving information. Either you have the bit or you don't have the bit. It is there or not there. And all the quantum bits, which are in quantum computers handled in the way Google and IBM trying to do it, are incomplete. Edgar, which I mentioned last time, so the 2 weeks before, has shown that you need tri-state logic to completely evaluate. And I know enough about LSI, VLSI hardware, so chips in other words, that this is indeed true. You have not just a voltage and not a voltage, and say 0 or not a voltage is some state, and a voltage like +3 or +5 volts is another state. You can also make it -5 volt. It doesn't give a sense from the argument what physical value you assign to it. But you have a state where you don't know yet. When you have gates in sequence and you cascade the gates, that some of your gate change may be one gate logically, then you know after one time of a gate run through cycle, whatever that is a physics, so that the chip has a propagation time from one transistor to the next. And when you cascade your gates, you have, say, 10 transistor chains in sequence, then you need 10 times longer time until the 10th transistor is informed by the state change of the first one next to the input, right? Just purely logically. The people in electronic circuits think it's instantaneous, but there's nothing instantaneous in a VLSI circuit. Hence, there are race conditions and stuff like that. And when you propagate in a chip, you can give you a helper state at each of the input gates, which are by default after reset of the chip set to true. And true means I don't know yet. So you have a state of an input, can be 0 or 1, and a state which says I don't know yet. And then logically, the input of the secondary transistor from the first one measures the output from the first one and says, this is 1 and I was 0 before. There is a voltage change. You cannot measure states. You can only measure state changes. And when there is state change, a current is flowing. And when the current is flowing, then suddenly the bit from I don't know goes to I know, because something has changed on that bit. Now we know for sure it's 0 at that moment. So it's a state change flow, a wave of state changes which goes over the chip, which is actually doing. Hence, a very old concept of Andy von Bechtolzheim, the founder of Sun, wanted always data flow computers who have no clock. And an ideal data flow computer would have an horrifyingly higher speed than a clock computer, because a clock computer, with all its bus systems and whether they're serialized or not doesn't matter, they are bus systems. They have 64-bit data bus, 64-bit address bus, and all that kind of thing. And they are clocked through sequency, and all the other arithmetic logic units have to wait until all the other transistors have settled. And because the physics don't know when they settle, they assume a clock frequency when is fast enough that is guaranteed to settle. And that is blocking the development of computer speed increase by a physical border of about 4 gigahertz is more or less game over. You can have 5 gigahertz chips, but this is just a trick to get your currents ever smaller. In the end, you end up with a 1-atom transistor, and the 1-atom transistor will be your final limit. Yeah, so and that will have a femtosecond or something, maybe like that, but not infinite. But when you have a data flow computer with 100 million transistors, then 50 million transistors might do something, while the other 50 million transistors don't see any state changes because they're waiting for calculations on the other ones. And that saves a tremendous amount of power and is as fast as the physics guarantees. So you don't need a clock. The chip changes at the fastest possible pace of state information transport. And in this information transport is exactly what Rajan said. The information comes discretely, is there or not there. And I see no analog sinus-cosinus style way to transport information, which would be the equivalent of saying light transports some information. It's a sin-cosine wave in magnetic electric form, which is assumed to transport information. But this is actually not true. I still have to understand where the bit actually is. And this in turn has what Gert has said to do with the phase of what a light quanta is. A light quantum is localized at a certain geometrical x, y, z point in the universe, whereas you can prove that the phase of such a stretched light wave can propagate to infinity. And most people say, why should a single photon stretch out to infinity? It makes no sense. But wait before you say no, because the photon is out of time. For a photon,
but it stretches out only until to the word radius, not to infinity.
That is right. Yeah, that is right. But what I'm saying is, a photon has arbitrary amount of time to transport its information, because for the photon itself, there is no time running. So the photon's point of view, word point, it arrives at the same time when it was generated from an atom. For the photon, 0 time has elapsed on its observation point. So it could run through the whole 13 billion years of the universe and get absorbed. So from a photon's relativistic point of view, it was instantaneous over the whole universe. So the argument is completely true.
Wait a second though. From the photon's point, it's instantaneous, but from our position
it's not. Yeah.
Right, but we are registering.
But if the photon is transporting the information, the photon's own rest frame says, I transported the information instantaneous and binary. Say it was polarization up, down. So the photon was created, traveled 13 billion years, billion, not million, and delivered the information of polarization in a measurement detector at the other end of the universe.
Okay.
From a photon's equivalent, so remember what Einstein said, rest frames are equivalent. You cannot decide which is the correct one.
Yeah, yeah.
So the photons is as right as your brain wants, which says, but that took 13 billion years. Except no, the photon said it did not take 13 billion years. It was instantaneous.
Right.
And both are right.
The point you're going from is that one is a discrete particle, the other is a wave.
What I'm saying is something to stretch even over the whole universe is not that difficult to understand once you take relativity into account and the fact that time is on halt for everything at speed of light, not near speed of light, like for an electron in an accelerator, but at speed of light, there is no time. Zero. It doesn't tick.
You can understand it in the following manner, because the universe is expanding. The starting point is at the point 0, and it will be returned to the observer at the same point at the 4D surface, and all observers who are at the same 4D surface are connected instantaneously. If you use if you do it right, you can connect them instantaneously. For example, with wie heißen die?
In German?
Ja, das fällt mir jetzt auch nicht ein. Ja, wie heißen die Photonen, die miteinander verbunden sind? Wie war das?
EPR connected ones? So.
Nee, die
entangled?
Ja, genau, ja. Die entangled photons.
Yeah, but entangled photons don't transmit information. So when you have the shadow of the moon going over the Earth, the transport time of the shadow on the Earth's surface is far superluminal. But you cannot transport information with the shadow going over the Earth. This is a
I will say they can transport information, but you cannot use it.
Okay, or this way. Yes, it transports the information because users see visibly that it gets darker for a moment, but it is not useful to transmit it outside of the Earth from information from a point near the sun to the Earth, which would take 5 minutes. So while the shadow is instantaneous, the 5 minutes cannot be bypassed. And the same is with the EPR phenomena, but from a rest frame point of view of a photon doesn't move, which means when I'm looking purely hypothetical in the geometry of a photon, whatever a photon looks like, you would see the geometry of the photon as a static image like on a piece of paper painted. Nothing is moving. Not even, the interesting thing is not even 0-point energy. This is not moving. Not moving means no time.
Because the starting point and the observed point of the observed photon are at the same place. You can,
no.
Yes, the photon. No,
the photon still has to move with speed of light.
Yes, it moves. Yes, but the point, es erstreckt sich. Was war das?
Extends.
Wie?
Extends.
Also, the photon extends over the whole universe from the starting point.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You're right. So that
the end of the extension is at the same point.
Okay, from the same point to the same point.
Yes, and so you can say it doesn't move, but it moves.
Okay, so the whole universe comes to you in a way. So yeah, okay. This is from a relativistic point of view a valid statement.
Okay, I better go anyway. Nice.
I have to be
here all
Thank
day.
you for your time. All was a pleasure to meet you again, and Hope to see
excellent
you across this
discussion.
meeting as soon as possible and give you feedback on that.
Great.
I have a lot to do. I must prepare my tax declaration.
Oh, ouch. Fun with the paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
You
We
bye.
just finished. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Come on.
Thank you.
Great
guys,
presentation.
I'll be in touch by email. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you all. Excellent discussion. Thank you.